concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
yeah,
rhino.
okay.
I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime, the folks
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6. It is Thursday. It is the 10th of July, ladies and gentlemen. We're into double digits and things ain't looking any better, I'm afraid. We wake every morning to news, hopefully, that things are going to improve in the country, that somehow Keir Starmer is going to break his duck and actually introduce some kind of policy that makes some sense, that actually does some good, that actually improves our lives. We hope every single day we wake up with, you know, this zeal in our hearts and hope in our eyes and all the rest of it. Starts to sound like you'll never walk alone. But no, this is the thing. But unfortunately, I'm afraid I haven't got any great news for you this morning because I'm afraid it's all pretty awful. Apparently, according to the front page of the Daily Telegraph, benefits pay more than being at work. So basically, no incentive if you're on benefits to go to any sort of working scenario because you'll actually end up about £2,500 worse off. Proof that work doesn't pay under Labour, says the Daily Mail. Sickness benefits to be worth £2,500 a year more than the minimum wage as a disincentive to work grows. Kemi Badenoch yesterday told Keir Starmer that we are basically a benefits society with a country attached. And I think that's a very similar point of view that we've been making for quite a long time. An awful lot of people feeling that the country has just become incredibly unfair because not only are hard-working people getting taxed more, but they're having to pay more out to people who don't do any work. And of course we'll have the same arguments about people who sometimes deserve benefits, sometimes need help because they're disabled. Of course all of that is true, but there's way too many people now on the benefit system and it's simply not sustainable. The other big story, of course, is after the summit yesterday between Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer. A kick in the galls is what it says on the front page of The Sun. France is going to take back just 50 migrants a week in the new deal with the Prime Minister. So what that means is, despite the fact that more than 40,000 people have arrived this year, only about 2,500 or a little bit over are going to go back. So it's actually 17 in, 1 out. That's right. It's not 1 in, 1 out. It's 17 in, 1 out. And I'm afraid that just doesn't make any sense. Also, a big exclusive on the front page of The Sun. Former Tory chairman Sir Jake Berry has announced that he is going to defect to the Reform Party. He's writing in The Sun. We're speaking to him, the first proper broadcast interview with him since that announcement was made. That is absolutely hot off the presses. Also, we'll be talking as well about £500,000 that people have been spending from the Environment Agency on talking lampposts. Yep, that's right. If you haven't got any friends, don't worry. We've got a lamppost for you to talk to, or possibly a park bench. We've got a migrant of the day, doesn't want to be sent back home because he's got a speech impediment. And we've got Greg Wallace, who apparently says that because of his autism, he can't wear underpants. Apparently he's very sensitive in that particular area. Didn't stop him putting a sock on it, though, did it? 5 minutes past 6, this is Morning Glory. We had a very interesting day here at Talk yesterday. Tom Slater's here. Very good morning to you, Tom. I just finished filming Plank of the Week. It's only to be told there'd been a massive power cut in the building, which meant that this floor and the one underneath 17 and 16 were completely out of power. So at which point I had to then do the drive time show with Jeremy Kyle from a tiny little studio downstairs on the 14th floor. So it feels like I haven't been away. I've literally, I think I got home about 10 past 8 last night, and here I am back again. But that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? What are you going to do?
No, absolutely.
You know, you must. You know, I didn't think. I know. I'll claim some benefits now and decide, because I've been traumatised by the fact that I've had to work more than one shift a day. I need about 3 weeks off.
No, exactly. The show must go on, Mike.
The show must go on. Exactly right. But also, I mean, this story about benefits being more worthwhile than work, we've sort of, a lot of the stories that you see these days, we've sort of known this for a while, and now it's finally being confirmed by actual data. Because for a long time, the lefties and the people in the Labour Party would say, this is absolute rubbish, you know, the whole point of benefits is that it's there to help people when they need it. And yes, of course, that's what it's meant to be for, but it seems to become something else, doesn't it? It's morphed into something terrible.
No, absolutely. It's become a trap for so many people, and this is a perfect example of this. If you are in a situation where it's actually better off for you, you're going to lose money if you just go and get a minimum wage job, in comparison to being on universal credit, getting some disability benefit, and I believe also being a PIP claimant is how they calculated this. Then why would you? It's not even in your interest. You know, you'd lose money. And, you know, it's one of those things where I wish people would just be honest about what it is that we're dealing with here. You're creating a disincentive for people to actually do the very thing that will allow them to pay their way and have a good life at the end of it.
And in the end, you know, Kemi Badenoch's actually right to say that we will, because the benefits bill, I mean, I think the sickness benefit alone bill is now reaching about 100 billion, and the overall benefits bill is something like 300 billion. I can't remember if that includes pensions or not. I don't think it does. But, you know, this idea, which was actually Gordon Brown's idea, I think, initially, wasn't it, to pay people, you know, sort of tax credits so that if you're not paid very well, you know, the government tops it up, which was always, to me, a ridiculously bad idea economically, because you're effectively, you're subsidising wages and kind of helping people who don't want to pay people enough money.
No, absolutely. There are so many ways in which the benefit system just becomes a form of almost like corporate welfare. It means that they don't have to pay their workers as much. It means that the state will step in to make up the shortfall. So again, it's one of those things where it's just warping the nature of the job market, the nature of pay in ways that are really unnecessary. And I think the conversation we need to be having is, are there people out there who are in need of benefits to live a dignified life? Absolutely. There's obviously a lot of people who actually probably require more, given if they've got very severe disabilities and whatever. But a system that treats almost like everyone as disabled is not going to be able to look after those who actually need it.
No, because when they make it that easy, and I guess, you know, obviously COVID was a large, you know, sort of portent of all of this, that, you know, people were able to claim for things that they should never have been able to claim for. You know, being paid not to go to work was never going to end well, was it? You know, and we were warned by people like Peter Hitchens, this is going to be a massive drain on the economy. And so it has proved, because we've now got people claiming for things like acne and obesity, and saying that they can't work because they're frightened to go outside the house and all this kind of stuff. And there doesn't seem to be any kind of mechanism by which to check whether any of it's a load of old cobblers. I mean, look at the country we've become. Greg Wallace, you know, which is obviously a slightly different case, claiming that you know, because of his autism, he can't wear any underwear, and because of his autism, sometimes he said inappropriate things. You know. And all of that may well be true, but it doesn't ring true, and he shouldn't get money for it.
No, absolutely.
And I presume he doesn't get money for it.
I suppose we found out that, you know, if things really do hit the skids for Greg Wallace, he can claim PIP. At this point. He's probably got some kind of grounds.
And he'll get a mobility car.
Yeah,
and he'll be able to drive around and it'll be absolutely fine. But that's the problem. I mean, there's a sort of a double-edged society growing here, isn't there? Because there's those, because we always get two reactions when we do stories about benefits. We get people ringing in who say, look, I've been working all my life, I had an accident and now I need some benefits and I need help, and that's absolutely fine. But there will also be people who have never worked. There will also be people who have never had a job, and maybe because it's worthwhile for them not to, it's not their fault.
No, absolutely, and especially the number of young people who are finding themselves trapped on these benefits. A lot of it to do with mental health. Even then, it's not entirely clear. You're talking about severe mental illness. You're talking about anxiety, depression, words that have kind of lost some of their meaning a little bit, especially amongst younger people. And finding yourself in a situation where you've never almost, you know, developed the habit of working, that again can be terrible, not just for your employment prospects, but also for, if we're going to use that phrase again, your mental health. Going out into work, being out in the world is pretty important, and yet there's, you know, vast swathes of young people, particularly in quite impoverished towns across the country, where they're just finding themselves trapped in this as depressing and anxiety-inducing
and in the current climate with Labour attacking all sort of entrepreneurs and all employers and making employers you know, pay even more money to hire anyone, there's actually not that many jobs around. There's an awful lot of places, I'm sure. I mean, where my two youngest boys live down in Sussex, there's not much going on by the way of jobs. You know, if you're not going to come and get a job in London, you're not going to get paid very much.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's one thing about the benefit system which can also mask the fact that these are young people who, particularly in those areas of the country where there isn't much work going around, it becomes a way of just masking unemployment as well. You know, you've got the government that can go around and say actually unemployment figures aren't doing too badly, but it's only because you've signed off and put out to pasture vast swathes of your own workforce, you know.
Exactly, like we haven't got any illegal migrants because now they're all just irregular migrants, you know, and that can remove them off that particular list, according to this study that's been done, basically, earnings of the unemployed who claim ill health payments will overtake those of workers on the national living wage next year. This is a warning from the Centre for Social Justice. Universal credit claimants who are not working and take the average house. See, that's the other bit, the housing benefit. And the cost of housing now is so high that if you're getting your house paid for, you know, why would you go to work where it's going to cost you more money to pay for your own place?
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't make any sense.
You create a situation where it's not in your interest to do the right thing, and that's just a terrible situation to land yourself.
I mean, Ian Duncan-Smith written a piece in the Mail today. Britain's broken benefit system costs billions and traps claimants in long-term dependency. And the quote from Kemi Badenoch, a welfare state with an economy attached. And it is just absolutely dreadful. Let's have a look at what happened to Prime Minister's questions yesterday, because many of you may have missed it. I was one of them, actually, because I was doing something else. Here's Keir Starmer, first of all, talking about his manifesto pledges.
Mr. Speaker, in their manifesto last year, Labour promised not to increase income tax, not to increase national insurance, and not to increase VAT. Does the Prime Minister still stand by his promises?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, it is rare. It is rare, yes. It is rare that he's able to give a clear answer, but I'm glad that he has done so. He boasted that he solved the doctor strike, but only a Prime Minister who was so weak and giving 28% pay rise to doctors, only now we see that they're still voting to strike again. He folds in every negotiation and claims that it is a triumph. Yes, he does. And we saw at the budget, Mr. Speaker, more promises. The Chancellor promised that she would lift the freeze on income tax and national insurance thresholds because, in her words, they hurt working people. Is that still government policy?
We remain committed to our budget, to our manifesto commitments. I realise that sticking to your fiscal rules and your manifesto commitments is a bit unfamiliar to the party opposite, but it's because of the decisions the Chancellor took, that this government has taken, that we can update the House. £120 billion of inward investment into this country since we took office. Business confidence at a 9-year high. That's longer than the Leader Opposition has been in Parliament. Deloitte this week saying the UK is now the best place to invest, creating 384,000 jobs. What a contrast to the mess that we inherited from the party opposite.
You do wonder if it's time for the men in the white coats, don't you, for this lot? I mean, you see old Rachel Reeves there chuckling away. I mean, what a contrast to last week when she was sobbing, you know, heavy eyes, you know, bags under her eyes, looking for all the world like she couldn't take another second of being Chancellor of the Exchequer. He launches into Two things interesting there. One, where he basically has ruled out income tax rises because he says they're going to stick to their fiscal rules. So he's kind of giving himself a cage there, which they can't get around. And now they're going to have to probably move around with the thresholds, aren't they, to try and drag more people into paying more tax without actually doing it.
No, absolutely. I think that's probably nailed on. They're just going to keep those tax thresholds frozen so that it drags more people in, as you say. And also, I think, opens up the question, which is on some of the papers today, about whether or not they're going to call it a wealth tax. Yeah. Something like that is what they're going to have to do if they're going to stick by those supposed pledges.
And when he starts ranting on about, inward investment at an all-time high, business confidence at an all-time high. I mean, we've got a story in the Telegraph today where it's basically saying that one pub a day is going to close under Rachel Reeves's new tax raise. This is coming from the British Beer and Pub Association. They say that 378 sites will shut across England, Wales and Scotland before the end of the year, up from 350 closures last year. This will take pub numbers to their lowest level in a century. And you've got people like Sacha Lord up in Manchester warning that this is the biggest attack on hospitality anybody's ever seen. They've lost 69,000 jobs, I think, already. They've already lost, I think, overall 250,000 jobs since the budget. How can he stand there and say, everybody's happy with the economy?
Oh, he's just deluded.
But mad, isn't it?
And the pub trade in particular, you think it's been hammered by so many things over the years. They were closing at a rate of knots, over the course of the past couple of decades. Yeah. Smoking ban hits them, COVID hits them, energy prices hits them, and now you've got this jobs tax by Rachel Reeves. Like, it is so many of the places that people have come to think of like as pillars of their community could just not be there. Yeah. And I think that would really be hung around this government's neck, not least because it would show their management the economy is terrible, but it also kind of marries up with what miserable people they are.
Yeah, so. They really are miserable, and they have no sense of humour whatsoever, do they? I mean, that's what you can see. And particularly Tetchy Starmer, whenever he's asked a question, he immediately just gets up on his hind legs and starts... He's like one of those yappy dogs, and you just give him a slap. Where's Mrs Macron when you need her? Is what I need to say. Not long before he told another lie, though, here he is talking about migration.
We're responsible for 4 million extra appointments in the NHS. We're responsible for a 10-year plan on the future of the NHS after they broke it. We're also responsible for free school meals being rolled out in a way which has never been done by any government. Breakfast clubs being rolled out, family hubs being rolled out, transport across the country, and migration coming down.
Migration coming down. One for the authors of do it yourself. 5 Go Mad on mescaline. What's he talking about? How has migration gone down? He's just done a deal with Emmanuel Macron, which has started off as being 1 in, 1 out, and now looks like it's going to be 17 in, 1 out. Right? Literally, he's going to send 50 people back. Out of something like, thousands and thousands that come every single week. And so it will amount to, I think, 2,600 in the first year, when we know there will be about 50,000 coming.
No, absolutely. It's
bonkers.
This is your kind of mind on Starmerism. You think that because you've set up some kind of arrangement and you can do a nice photo op for it and you can brand it in a certain way, the fact that it will barely touch the sides of the increasing problem of illegal migration sort of doesn't matter. I mean, it's fascinating that they're not even trying to pretend like they're taking this issue seriously anymore. This is just finicky things around the edges to try and create the impression that you're doing something. But people are seeing through it so quickly now. Of course they are. They just don't believe anything he says, and they've got reason to.
Also, as somebody said to me yesterday, when this story broke late yesterday afternoon, who's going to make the decision? I mean, given what happens at the moment from the Home Office perspective, who's going to make a decision about which one out of the 17 people that comes over in a small boat is going to go home? Are they all going to be able to stay because they've all got ties to the United Kingdom? Are they all going to be able to stay because they can't be sent home? We've got a migrant today who can't be sent back to Turkey, I think it is, because he's worried that you'll have people make fun of him because he's got a speech impediment. I mean, people might make fun of you here, mate. That doesn't mean it's going to be the end of your life, does it?
You think when they drew up the kind of European Convention on Human Rights, that it's that gentleman that they had in mind, just someone who might endure kind of mild teasing.
Yeah, when people talk about post-World War II, the concentration camps, the absolute, slaughter of mass numbers of people because of their ethnicity or because of their religion. And this bloke's going, no, I've got a speech impediment. You're not quite in the same category, really. Not in
the slightest, no. But this is the world we live in. It's one of these stories every week now. Yeah. Chicken nuggets.
Well, there's one every day, Fred. I mean, that's why we call it Migrant of the Day. This guy is an unnamed Kurd. I guess he's unnamed because people might make fun of his name as well. Homos argue that the man man could safely go back to his home country as long as he deleted his Facebook account. I mean, what are they talking about? Apparently it contains statements critical of the authorities. It's so simple, isn't it? If you want to come here and stay here, you open up a Facebook account and start slagging off the country you just came from, and then you'll never have to go back.
No, exactly. We're just presenting people with one loophole after another, and like it's got to the point where even if the government follow through on everything that they claim they want to do, you know, beef up the penalties for people smugglers, get into this ridiculous deal with Macron, you know, you would still unless you're willing to touch that third rail of ECHR, then you're not going to be able to even do your 1 in, 1 out, 17 in kind of manoeuvre. So it's I think people have just seen right through this now.
Yeah, I mean, inside the Sun, they've got 50 a week, c'est tout, tiny total of illegals France set to take back. There's also a row over the Bibby Stockholm, because apparently the Royal Navy is set to house sailors on a barge like the Bibby Stockholm in a bid to save some money. A 100-room flotel has been found. The crew of flagship aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth are moving to the barge when the ship goes into dock for repairs. I mean, that, in a nutshell, kind of tells you everything about our war footing, doesn't it? You know, so you've got the Royal Navy over here on a war footing in case we get attacked by Russia, but unfortunately the boat's got to go in for repairs, so they have to go and sit on a barge, which doesn't have any guns on it, while we wait out the war.
And it also tells you everything about how, you know, our discussion about migration is so skewed. Like, people were talking about the Bibby Stockholm as if it was like a encroachment upon their human rights to house them on there. Right. Similar thing would often happen in relation to army barracks and so on, and yet we're more than happy to actually put our soldiers and servicemen
army
on there.
people in the army barracks.
So
that's what it's for. You know, I know, it is pathetic, isn't it? Anyway, listen, we've been running over quite a lot lately, so I'm going to be in terrible trouble. 21 minutes past 6. Coming up, we're going to have a look at what Emmanuel Macron did when he sat next to Princess Kate at that massive banquet the other night. Also, we've got a story about parking fines reaching 1,640 an hour. And also, some interesting stuff with the Attorney General. Apparently thinks he's even more important than he actually is. This is Morning Glory.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 25 minutes past 6. There's some very weird things going on in the world at the moment. Apart from everything else, we should tell you we're going to be doing the first proper interview with Jake Berry since he announced in The Sun last night that he is leaving the Conservative Party and joining Reform. But have a listen to this and tell me what you think it is. Do we have it? Sounds a bit like a plane, doesn't it? Now, where do you think you might hear that sound? Probably at an airport, right? This, I kid you not, will blow your socks off. Heathrow Airport is going to blast the soundtrack of jet engines and beeping scanners throughout the summer, right, as a special project to try and help people prepare for getting on planes. I kid you not, right? Passengers flying from Heathrow this summer will be subjected to a non-stop soundtrack of roaring aircraft engines, tannoy announcements and beeping security scanners, which you can already hear because you're at Heathrow Airport.
I have so many questions about this.
Yeah.
I mean, is this not slightly surplus to requirements, do we think?
I would think so. It says
it's a
4-minute loop created entirely from more than 50 sounds sampled from the airport's terminals and runways. It started playing on Tuesday of this week, and apparently it's going to run till the end of August. I mean, this is where we are in the world now.
Someone's laughing all the way to
somebody
the
at the airport's making fake airport noises to play to people at the airport who can hear real airport noises by being at the airport.
I feel like they could put a bit more effort into making sure that, you know, the power doesn't go down, or
that might be good.
Keeping planes running on time is. Someone has pulled off an absolute masterstroke there by conning Heathrow's bosses into giving them probably Lord knows how much money.
I bet you, yeah.
Sit around.
Composed by Grammy-nominated musician and producer Jordan Reiki.
Oh, of course.
And it's called Music for Heathrow. Rather brilliantly, you know, what a fantastic title. And he says the track is intended to evoke the excitement and anticipation at the start of a summer holiday while helping to diffuse any pre-holiday jitters.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But again,
do you think they'll have the guy, you know, fighting to get to the front of the Wetherspoons queue and the noise of the sort of the shouting for the third pint or something like that?
Flying across the air. But again, if it was going to serve that purpose, could you not just listen to it kind of live, i.e. the planes going over and the beeping and the whatever?
You would think. And the actual announcements, which would be all helpful. Because what if you hear an announcement that you think's a real announcement, it turns out it's not a real announcement, you go to the wrong gate. You miss your flight. This is Lee Boyle, Director of Services at Heathrow. We hope tuning in will be the perfect start to our passengers' well-deserved summer breaks. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't get it. I just don't get it. Other sounds on the track are recordings of passenger footsteps, passports being stamped, bags hitting the luggage carousel, and dings from lifts and tannoy. Ding!
Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, this is an incredible piece of work. How much time do these people have on their hands?
Yeah.
You would think running an airport is quite expensive and busy making already. Would you really need to be sitting around thinking, you know what we need?
Yeah, this is peak sort of Britain 2025, isn't it? You know, let's just fake something in a place where you can hear the real thing. I mean, unbelievable. And just as if that's not mad enough, and I'm sorry to bombard you with these weird stories, almost £500,000 of taxpayers' money is being spent on an AI gimmick, allowing the public to talk to benches and lampposts.
Right.
Maybe one for Greg Wallace when he hasn't got any more friends. I'm going to go and talk to the lamppost and tell it some dirty jokes.
Exactly. Well, at least that would take some of the pressure off everyone else in Greg Wallace's life. But I mean, first of all, this is a terrible idea because it's really not going to allow us to distinguish between who is talking to a lamppost because they've completely lost their mind and who is talking to a lamppost because they're curious as to how this AI thing's going to work, so I don't like it on that front. Is talking to lampposts really the best thing to be encouraging in society in general?
I don't think it
talk
is.
to each other.
I mean, it's bad enough when you see somebody walking down the street just talking, you think to themselves, it turns out they're on a phone, but they've got headphones in, so they look like what I used to call nutters walking down the street, just talking to themselves, right? But apparently, the Environment Agency will pay Hello Lamppost Limited £460,000 over 3 years to run the service. They basically put a QR code on street furniture like a bus stop or even a parking meter.
There we go.
And you can talk to it. But you can't really talk to it, can you?
It's going to be a quite one-way conversation.
It
surely.
is.
I mean, it's not going to ask about how your day is.
How's it going? Terrible.
But again, kind of the talking lamppost company or whatever, fantastic work in terms of convincing someone to hand you over money to do this.
It really is mad. Let's go back to Prime Minister's questions, because there was a moment yesterday, and a couple of people pointed out to me that this is why Nigel Farage will become the next Prime Minister of this country. He was heckled in a really bad way. Have a look.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The main reason there's a Christian that this country decided Some of you want to get in a little late. If this takes forever, you won't get in. Nigel Farage. Thank you. The main reason this country wisely voted for Brexit back in 2016, and that included millions of Labour supporters, is because we wanted to take back control of our borders so that we and we alone could decide who comes and settles in our country. Does the Prime Minister understand that that demand today is even greater than it was back in 2016, and that we demand, the country demands, that you say to the French President, will you shut up? That you say to the French President, we will not accept undocumented males across the English Channel, and that you are not dictated to by an increasingly arrogant, anti-Brexit French President.
I mean, that's just disgraceful, isn't it? There's a guy, I think he's MP for Dewsbury, I've got a feeling he might be a Lib Dem, whose voice you keep hearing saying, you were lied to, they were lied to. He just heckles him all the time. And later, Lee Anderson, who I think was the one whose voice you heard saying to him, shut up, put another question to the Speaker and said, you know, can you not kind of effectively control these people a little bit more? But it shows the kind of disdain that they hold for Nigel Farage. They don't really like the fact that Reform are doing so well. They hate the fact that he's an MP, you know, and they can't treat him, you know, with any kind of respect at all.
No, absolutely. And it's also because of the voters who put him there, who that Lib Dem thinks were all lied to and hoodwinked. I mean, it's just such a recruiting sergeant for Reform, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, people just see their own representatives or the party that are leading in every poll right now being treated as if it's like this kind of virus that needs to be expelled from the House of Commons. You just think these people are... They don't realise how much they're doing to damage their own position as much as anything else.
Exactly right. I mean, I saw a clip of Humza Yousaf, the former First Minister of Scotland, the other day, warning about Reform winning an election and becoming the next government. You know, saying things like, you know, they want to get rid of net zero. You know, I'm going tick. You know, they want to deport, you know, refugees. Tick. You know, I mean, it's just, but he doesn't. He's like, this is a terrible thing that will happen to this country. And it's like, yeah, well, the big reason people are voting for them is because they quite like what they're saying. You know, the reason Jake Berry's defected from the Tories, he thinks the Tories are a waste of time, as do many other people now. No,
absolutely, and it's one of those things where how long can they carry on demonising this party when it's odds on to become the largest party in the next government?
Because you're effectively demonising the people voting for them.
Exactly, and how many times are you going to suggest that this is some aberrant, strange, hard right party when it's clearly not? Otherwise, it wouldn't be appealing to that many people. So it's one of those things where I think if the other parties, particularly kind of centre-left parties, were clever, they would try and beat Reform on other terrain. But because they are just viscerally upset by them, because they're so emotionally incontinent, they can't help themselves and do stupid theatrical things like
We'll
this.
have a look at Keir Starmer's answer to that question.
Mr. Speaker, we are fixing the mess that we inherited. We are working with other countries to ensure that we take the measures necessary to stop people crossing the Channel. They are serious answers to serious problems. His proposal for 10 years, wagging the Tory dog, has been to break everything and claim that's how you fix things, to stick two fingers up at your neighbours and then expect them to work with us. And he votes against the Borders Bill, which gives more powers to our law enforcement to deal with security at our border. And, Mr. Speaker, the reason for that is he has no interest in fixing the problem because he wants to milk it and exploit it. That's the truth about him and his party.
There we go again. You know, the trouble with Keir Starmer is that he doesn't get it either, and he hates the idea that he has to keep referring to Reform, because you can tell, because he does it so often, you know. I mean, he's constantly having a go at them.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? Because even though he tried to kind of avoid talking about migration in the kind of shame on you way that some of the people on the backbenches were doing there. You just think he's not up to this. If the next election is going to be Labour versus Reform, that certainly feels like how it's shaping up. You have the populist on one side and you have the kind of project manager on the other, talking about the tiny bits of progress we might have made, and if you just think he's not up to this, he's bringing a kind of wooden spoon to a knife fight, and it's going to not end well.
It's not going to end well. I mean, I just don't think he's even going to be there in time for the next election. Let's get a voice note from Darren.
Hi, Darren from Suffolk. Great show as ever. Ready with the popcorn from 6 a.m. this morning. Now, listen, Keir Starmer. How can he stand at the box and say we've created 384,000 jobs when in June 25, the latest stats come out, so there's 115,000 people more unemployed. That's 4.6%. I think it's 1.64 million. How can he say that? It's a total lie. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, that is the problem. I mean, the total lies just continue to come. He just continues to keep saying the same things over and over and over again, and it is absolutely incredible. We've got lots more to do. Tony from Sussex says this: will Heathrow also start booming out the sound of an aircraft crashing, with Mayday being broadcast as well, just in case the worst happens? Truly the definition of wokeness. Absolutely. And Joanna from Salisbury says, my airport sounds to add to the tensions. What happened to music? How about various recordings like Summer Holiday by Cliff Richard or Leave You on a Jet Plane, John Denver? I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to be assailed when I'm at the airport by anything, really. There's nothing worse than getting a lift and having hopelessly bad music played at you, and I certainly don't want to have ambient noises played at me, really, either. Do you?
Is that really too much to ask, you know, that you're not going to be bombarded either by music or by this weird sound design?
You know, and, you know, just the everyday sounds that happen when you walk down the street. And next you'll be walking down the street, and a lamppost will be playing the sound of a car going past. You know, because there aren't any more cars, because street cars outlawed them. You just have to listen to the sound of one, you know. Unbelievable. 6:35. Coming up, we'll talk some more about what's going on around the country. We've got the Attorney General, who's apparently given himself even more power than he had when he got the job given to him by his mate Keir Starmer. And there goes the migrant tracker there, 44,359. Still way underestimating it, I think, in general, but it's the correct number. Would be 45,000 any day now. And, of course, we're going to be sending out of that lot 2,600 back. Marvellous, isn't it? I wonder where they're all going to live. This is Talk.
Your seatbelt can now be fastened ready for departure. This is a no-smoking service. Thank you for observing this policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, 6:38 with you, and Tom Slater is here as well with us from Spiked Online. One story that we haven't mentioned yet, but I mentioned it yesterday on the show, is that Greece has had a bit of an epiphany on this one. I don't know if you saw the story late yesterday, that they basically said to anyone who wants to come illegally from northern Africa that they will arrest them and detain them shortly before deporting them. They're actually building, I think, a deportation centre and a detention centre on Crete. where they're going to take people. So anyone who arrives on any part of the Greek shoreline, which is obviously massive, they're just going to arrest them, and they're not going to you know, ferry them to a hotel. They're not going to sign them in. They're not going to give them a phone. They're not going to give them a blanket. They're not going to give them anything.
And if people
so
forget
it can be done.
I know people forget that Greece and Italy have been bearing the brunt of the inward migration, illegal migration into Europe since the migration crisis kicked off as well. And you do think that there's so much kind of wittering in this country about how to deal with this problem, concerns about what it says about us as a nation if we take this issue too seriously. The politics of this are moving on very quickly elsewhere across the continent, and people are just not really paying attention, because it's an issue that everyone is confronted with.
And one of the problems with the one-in, one-out plan that was Macron and Starmer's alleged deal was that a lot of the southern Mediterranean countries, like Greece, like Italy and Spain, said, hang on a minute, you know, you can't just send them back to us, because that was going to be the rule. You send them back to the EU country they first landed in, and Greece don't want them, and Italy certainly don't want them, and Spain doesn't want them either. So, I mean, the whole problem is, as you say, one for Western Europe to have to grip together.
No, absolutely. And it's one of those things that Western Europe and Europe as a whole kind of gripping this issue is clearly not helped by the EU, because they've been arguing over this forever, because of the fact that you've got, you know, the southern European countries which are being hit most hardest by this, but you've got other countries who are saying, not unfairly, our publics don't want to take these migrant quotas that you're pushing on us. So it's all just a mess. Starmer's thing, his idea that what we need to do is to work with Europe, absolutely, these are shared problems, but at the same time, as soon as you get entangled in those internal EU debates, you know nothing's going to get anywhere.
Nothing's going to move. No, the only thing that's going to move are the migrants who are moving from country to country, sort of at will, deciding on which place is the best one to settle in. And inevitably, the best place to settle in is Britain, because that's where you get the most for your buck. Let's have a look at Lord Harmer, or Hermer, as he's otherwise known. He's apparently handed himself an effective veto over all government policy. This is according to new documents that the Telegraph has seen. They basically reveal that Lord Hermer has made a number of controversial changes to the guidance that's given to lawyers in this country. And he's basically said there should be more references to international law. He's inserted 23 more references to international law, and he's told lawyers that they should assume every decision made by a minister will be subject to a legal challenge. I mean, what's wrong with these people? I mean, stay away from lawyers, whatever you do.
No, absolutely. Lord Hermer, he's not even elected.
No.
He's an appointed
His mate gave him a job, effectively.
Exactly, and he's basically putting himself as someone who can lord it over government policy. And they hide behind this idea of, oh, it's just about making sure that the law isn't broken. There's even inserted a snitch clause telling civil servants to inform him if ministers fear that they might be about to break the law. But international law is a bit of a nonsense anyway. Fundamentally, it's Parliament that makes law, which impacts this country. And yes, there are these kind of international agreements we are signed up to. But first of all, those are often broadly kind of over-interpreted by people like Lord Hermer, but also because of the fact that that's fundamentally not the law in the land in the same way as anything else. This is just a kind of phony, legalistic attempt to just block the government from doing things that Lord Hermer probably wouldn't want them to do in the first place. That's all this is. They just hide behind these kind of convoluting
But it's
concepts.
also a kind of a veiled warning, it seems to me, from people like Hermer, who think that he should be probably, you know, master of the universe because he's so brilliant, he's got such a giant brain. It's basically kind of a warning to ministers to say, if you think you're going to be able to get away with something, I can stop you, because I can stop you through the courts, because I can stop you with a legal review. So actually, forget about the will of the people. What about the will of, you know, the Human Rights Brigade?
No, absolutely. And this, you just think what a terrible move it was to appoint him in the first place, because
he's been nothing but a thorn in the side, hasn't he?
I know, and it was always a terrible appointment, because he is a human rights barrister in the worst possible sense, as far as he just thinks that, you know, government shouldn't be able to do anything as far as it's hamstrung, and also just one of those people who claims that this is about upholding our legal obligations, but really it's just about pursuing policies that he agrees with. But just, I guess, because Starmer's mates with him clearly sort of also looked up to him when they were coming up through the human rights barrister set together. It's one in a very long line of terrible decisions that Starmer has made, because it's just hanging around his neck now.
And eventually, like all people who get things wrong, both of them will be out of a job, and it just depends on who goes first, really. Just a little aside before we get into more serious matters. A lot of pictures of Wimbledon this morning. The Mail's got a piece saying why Wimbledon's Royal Box is the new A-list red carpet, and there's lots of people like Rebel Wilson, Kate Blanchett, Camilla's there yesterday, Sienna Miller, Olivia Rodrigo, Dominic Cooper, David Beckham was there earlier, all sorts of, you know, celebrities, and including Hugh Grant. But we've got some footage of Hugh Grant at Wimbledon. It's a very nice sunny day. He doesn't seem to have lasted the lunch. He looks as though he's not exactly enthralled by the action there. Slumped, sort of having a little snooze, as you do when you get to a certain age.
Yeah.
You know, a couple of glasses of claret and he's away.
Yeah, full stomach. He's just on
Come
the
on,
dose.
you wake up, mate. You're on camera. You're in the royal box. You know, if you want to go for sleep, stay inside. You know, that's. I mean, the sun can do it to you as well.
No, exactly.
At that age, you know.
Exactly, and as you say, you know,
Poor old Hugh.
Who would begrudge a man of increasing years a nice little snooze in the afternoon?
Yeah, busy man, very busy man. Wake up, Hugh. Never mind. 6:43. Coming up, we're going to talk about parking charges. 1,000, believe it or not, 640 parking fines. These are private companies that are issuing, not a day, not a week, every single hour. Absolutely incredible stuff. This is Talk.
You know, one of the most pertinent comments was made actually by the trial judge. You know, we've had this awful, harrowing trial. We've heard the details which have convicted this man.
Yeah.
At the conclusion, the judge said, whatever his motivation was, it misses the point in terms of, was it terrorism, was it not terrorism? Yeah. What's quite clear is that he was identified as a deeply dangerous and troubled individual many times.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory at 6:46. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Alan in Middlesbrough says the Heathrow soundtrack of airport noises should be described as Lindsay Hoyle tinnitus. That's quite good, isn't it? I mean, he's probably got that sound in his head all the time because everywhere he goes, he's thinking of his next freebie. Hi, Mike. There's an idea regarding the benefits scammers, says Jim. Pay their benefits in vouchers that can only be spent in major supermarkets, and as far as the Motability scheme goes, let's go back to those little blue three-wheeled disabled cars we used to see in the 1970s. Great show. As always. I mean, people have got so much to say about Motability and the state of the benefit system in general. We'll get back to all of that. But a couple of big stories we haven't mentioned yet. The doctor's strike we should get into. I mean, Wes Streeting seems to say that he doesn't really have a clue how to deal with this. He put out a tweet yesterday saying PMA strikes are unnecessary and unreasonable. There isn't a precedent in British trade union history for calling a strike after a 28.9% pay rise, let alone a 5-day strike. He's right, isn't he?
No, absolutely. I mean, we've never seen this before. Usually, up until recent years, you would see doctors' unions, nurses' unions be pretty careful before they call for some kind of industrial action, not least because it doesn't take much for people to turn against these kinds of moves, particularly when it is a matter of life or death. It's one of those things, of course, there has been this pay erosion. No one's saying that should have taken place. There's obviously a case to answer, but it's how you go about it, because if you're engaging in strike action, particularly if you're in the public sector, essential public service, if the public aren't on your side, then your position is going to become incredibly weak incredibly quickly. You can't just keep.
Also, I mean, the point about the falling behind of inflation and all of that, was kind of taken care of. It wasn't as if they never got pay rises. I remember during the last strike, which lasted pretty much a year, from like the summer of 23 all the way through to July of 24, when Labour got in, suddenly gave them 22%. That was supposed to catch up with all of that, because it wasn't as if they weren't getting any pay rises up until that moment. It wasn't like they were missing pay rises. They were just getting, what you might call single-digit ones, 4 or 5% here and there. So, I mean, they're wrong to paint it as though they've somehow been neglected over the years and they've never got proper pay rises, because it's just not true.
I mean, I suppose it's one of those things where pretty much everyone has experienced this sort of pay erosion over the course of the past 10 or 12, 13 years. And I think it's one of those things where when the public look upon this as well, fairly or unfairly, they think, well, we've had to put up with that, and we haven't been able to enter into these kinds of negotiations with our employers. So again, you just think patience is wearing a little bit thin, particularly because everyone's experience of the health service at the moment is not great, even if on some measures it might be starting to improve. Well, I mean,
not Keir Starmer, Wes Streeting, excuse me, is talking about how the state of the NHS is sort of hanging by a thread, that it's about to sort of collapse, and this particular latest strike, which starts on the 25th of July, 5 straight days, they say will cost at least 200,000 operations, and it'll probably be more like 500,000 operations by the end of it, because even one week impacts the previous month and the month after, right? So it's going to ruin it, and it's, even as Keir Starmer's talking about how he's fixed the NHS. Well, they haven't fixed the NHS. They've got a 10-year plan to fix it, and so far the first thing that's happened is the doctors have gone on strike.
No, absolutely, and you're completely right about the knock-on effects of these things. I mean, all of those strikes last year, they were continuing to be felt across the system for months afterwards. And I think maybe last year it was difficult for people to work out how much of that was just the NHS being clapped out, how much of that was the strikes. It was easier to blame the government. I think particularly after those pay awards, that argument is not really going to sit. And I think the BMA will be, they're onto a loser here. Again, aside from the kind of rights and wrongs of this, in a sense, you're clearly not bringing the public with you, and they're increasingly becoming incredibly hostile. I'm sure you can see that in a lot of the responses you get to this particular story.
Definitely. And the other story, I mean, I'm sort of reluctant to talk about it because it's so horrible, but the front page of the Mirror this morning, astonishing bravery of the Southport children. I, like the Southport inquiry, don't like to mention this character's name, and I'm going to try and ask you not to do it as well. I don't really want to give him the oxygen of publicity, but one story that stands out is on the front page of the Mirror today. One girl, aged 7, was stabbed 33 times as she shielded others and helped them to flee while he ran amok inside this room full of young girls. It's just horrific. You can't even imagine. And I was listening to a couple of reports yesterday from people saying that it's a year on, but so many of the children who survived are suffering terribly already.
No, absolutely. It's one of those things where we all knew the horror of what happened that day, in terms of the 3 lives that were taken away, in terms of the horrific nature of the attacks and the injuries. But as soon as you actually really start to kind of dig into those details, yes, there's some incredible stories of bravery from the children, from the people who intervened to try and slow him down, to try and stall until the police could show up and so on. Just that level of violence and depravity, it's just pure evil what you're looking at.
It really is. And the idea that this character can still somehow get himself a kettle and can still throw boiling water over prison officers where he is being held for the rest of his life just doesn't bear thinking about. They should just lock him in a dark room and leave him to perish, I think. Let's get a voice note from Pete on migrants.
When the new legalised illegal immigrants come over, will their family here be the ones that have already come over on a dinghy but are still illegal? And suddenly when the illegal immigrants that are now legal immigrants come over, because they're coming over now legally, would their illegal family that's already here illegally suddenly become legal?
Yes, I think it's the answer to all of that under the new rules by Keir Starmer. Everybody's now a legal migrant. In fact, they're not illegal anymore, they're just irregular, aren't they? That's the point. Let's look at this page 13 of Daily Mail. Motorists are hit by a record 1,640 parking tickets every single hour last year, despite government promises to crack down on bandit operators. Well, of course, as soon as the government announces a crackdown, it immediately gets worse, right?
Exactly. We see that with migration, where they said they were going to smash the gangs and then they're just smashing all the records for boat crossings. You see it again here. They've got the reverse Midas touch, this government. As soon as they announce crackdown on anything, it seems to explode.
It's like every time
popularity.
anyone says we're going to have a bonfire of the Quangos, somehow there end up being more Quangos.
Yeah, they set up another dozen or so.
Yeah, exactly right. Set up a Quango to destroy the Quangos. It is ridiculous. But here we go. The previous record of 12.8 million given out in 2023-24 has been beaten by this year's ruthless firms issued 14.4 million tickets to drivers in the 12 months to April of this year. That's more than 27 every minute.
I mean, this is just ridiculous.
That's mad, isn't it?
And you know that this is not because there's been some crazy uptick in people parking terribly. It's just become one of the other things that drivers are having to deal with these days. They're just being pinched and fined and got at from absolutely every angle. You know.
I was talking to one of the guys driving me in the other day who said that he got a ticket because he parked. He was waiting for somebody outside a hotel. And he was parked in a particular spot which didn't apparently have any signage saying you can't park here. And it turns out that he got a parking ticket and he appealed it. And the explanation came that because he was sat there for more than half an hour, there was a time limit on how long you could sit there. But there was no sign that told you that. And he said, well, how do I know that? He said, I was picking up a customer that I had to wait half an hour. You know, it's his job. And he said, in the end, you just give up. Because you think about taking him to court and you end up spending thousands of pounds on your own kind of legal defence, even if you haven't got an expensive lawyer, and it's just not worth it. So you end up just giving in, and you go, oh, all right. And the price now is ludicrous. I was talking to somebody who got one the other day, and I think it's now something like £160. Or £165 or something. If you don't pay it straight away, if you pay it straight away, you get it reduced down to 80. But it's a lot of money, isn't it?
No, it is, and it's just
especially for people who drive for a living.
Absolutely, you're just punishing people, particularly these days, because of how difficult it is to just drive around a big city like London. You know, because of all the charges which are being levied, because of all the traffic and so on. It's just the people you're hitting are not. Is going to be disproportionately people who just have to drive for a living, not people who are, taking the Michael by parking where they shouldn't or speeding or what have you. So, it's just another thing that just feels like more nonsense to have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, purely because of money grubbing and dysfunction.
And it just drives people mad and just makes everybody's life more difficult, and particularly for those people who are, as I say, having to drive for a living. So frustrating. Really frustrating. I mean, my son came up to visit me on Tuesday and he drove up, decided to drive up from Sussex because he's got a new little second-hand car. But he said, I don't know if I'm supposed to pay the ULEZ or not. I said, well, you have to go online. So luckily, he's savvy enough to do that. But, it's not clear. Nobody really knows. His car's, he's got an old 2010 car. I said, if it's not diesel, you're probably OK. But you never really know because they can change the rules willy-nilly and never tell anyone.
I know, and they kind of like it that way. They like it to be confusing because then they could stick you with something. And then you don't know if this is legitimate. You don't know if this is just them being a little bit trigger happy. But they like it that way because this is a revenue raiser for all these different.
They love it to be confusing. You're right. Speaking of driving, I mean, this is quite a big story. It's on a couple of the front pages. It's on the front of the Mail and the front of the Sun as well. The inside story with the humiliation that Jerry and her Formula One husband's shock sacking have caused. Big piece in the Sun as well. And it's a year after the sexting scandal. But Christian Horner apparently broke down in tears as he said farewell to staff after being sacked by his Red Bull team. It's not clear whether he's been sacked as a result of that investigation, which cleared him effectively, but it's all a bit dodgy, isn't it?
No, there's something so murky about all of these things, and it's very difficult to kind of speculate about what precisely happened, given the fact that this is internal, given the fact that a lot of these things don't necessarily add up. How can you be cleared and then still pushed out? There's often things we don't know, I suppose it's fair to say, but there is just such a febrile climate when any kind of allegations are made these days, where the tendency is to kind of act quite decisively and swiftly, whether or not that's the right move.
But I mean, have they? It's taken a year to come to this particular decision, I suppose, and everyone assumed, and probably as well as Ginger Spice, as she used to be known, thought it was all kind of over. But it's not, clearly. Which brings us back to old Greg Wallace, back on page 5. Greg, your MasterChef dinners are in the bin, is the Sun headline. It looks as though the BBC are considering basically binning every single episode of his last series. And you just think about they can't get anything right, can they, the BBC? On the one hand, they let people off with stuff, and then when they decide to clamp down on things, they sort of get it completely wrong as well. And I mean, they've employed this guy for many years. I'm not a fan of MasterChef. It's not something I used to watch, really. And he's clearly a guy who doesn't know when to say, don't do that, Greg. Don't take all your clothes off and run around naked, and don't pinch women's backsides, and don't make lewd jokes to people that you don't know very well. He claims it's all because he doesn't know where the guidelines are because he's got autism. This is his latest excuse.
Not great.
But if you employ the guy for that length of time, why are you going to kill off everything that he ever did as if he didn't exist? It's kind of a year zero attitude to things.
No, exactly. It's because they failed to take these allegations seriously, or fail to just have a word with him, or fail to just lay out some kind of boundaries. It then becomes, we need to expunge him from anything.
As if he was never here.
And also as if that's going to kind of traumatise the viewing public, because they're, you know, watching the latest series of MasterChef or catching up on some old ones, and the presence of this individual, which is going to be so rattling to them. As you say, they failed to deal with the issue in the first place. It gets worse and worse and worse. It becomes a big scandal, and then they kind of overreact in a different sort of way. But this is the BBC all over.
Oh yeah, we mustn't have any of that anywhere near. But it's okay to broadcast out old, what's his name, Bob Villan. You know, that's fine. You know, I presume that's disappeared from Trace now. I don't know what's happened to that. But there we are. Let's get another voice note from Steve.
Morning, Mike. Nice and early, great show. Why don't Kemi Badenoch ever call him a liar in the Prime Minister's questions? I don't get it. He stands there, and everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie, but no one pulls him up on it. I don't get it.
I think they've got a rule, have they not, in the House of Commons, that you can't call people liars, because it's considered to be unparliamentary language. It's all right to heckle Nigel Farage all day, every single second. Tom Slater, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We've got plenty to do. Coming up, James Price is going to join us, former government advisor. We'll get his take on the French deal. 17 in, 1 out. Absolutely ridiculous. Also, we'll get his view on Jake Berry defecting to reform. He's on the show later on as well. Don't forget, if you've got a story that's affected you or your family and you think we should know about it or investigate it further, we've got a new series, a service here. Email us at tips@talk.tv. That's tips@talk.tv, and we'll look into it for you. This is Morning Glory, back after the news.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of £70.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Keeping it real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to nearly 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. It is Thursday, the 10th of July, and I think we're still in the midst of this Anglo-French summit, aren't we? I think Macron's still here. I don't know why. What is he doing here still? We should have 1 in, 1 out when it comes to world leaders. You know, we've had Emmanuel Macron. We get rid of him, and can we have Donald Trump now? Because that might be more interesting. He's apparently planning to come here on a state visit. I wonder if King Charles will be quite as friendly and oleaginous as he was to Macron, telling him that there are no borders, you know, il fait beau. and all of that nonsense, and how lovely we are. A lot of people saying to me, by the way, that banquet was way over the top, given that people haven't got much money at the moment, despite what Keir Starmer says. They're struggling with the cost of living. A whole bunch of Labour MPs, by the way, have also written a letter now to Keir Starmer telling him to do more to bring down the cost of living for people, because it's becoming really, really expensive to eat, really expensive to go anywhere, really expensive to pay your electricity bill. That's going to go up again, by the way. We've got more news on that for you. The big stories of the day this morning, though, are, of course, that it now doesn't actually pay you to go to work. You're better off staying on benefits, where you'll make more money than if you were on minimum wage by a factor of about £2,500 a year. Also, we've got the deal, which is the one-in, one-out deal for migrants, made yesterday by Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, and it's actually 17 in, 1 out. So if you figure that out for yourselves, that means if there are more than 44,000 people that have come in the last year, we'll effectively send back about 2,500 of them. Brilliant. Absolutely great. A kick in the galls is what it says on the front page of The Sun. As you can see there, the migrant tracker, nearly up to 45,000. And we're only going to put out 1/17 of that, which is absolutely and utterly ridiculous. Also, on the front pages this morning, we're going to be talking as well about Red Bull. They booted out Christian Horner after a year of a sexting investigation. But one story that has caught our eye, aside from anything else that's going on, is something that's happening at Heathrow Airport, you know, the place where they occasionally run out of electricity. They've decided to have a sort of ongoing live sound of airports while you walk through the airport. Have a listen to this.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
Yeah. How do you know you're walking through an airport? Because they're playing the sound of an airport at you. What on earth are they thinking? What's going on? This is peak 2025 Britain, right? What's that noise? That's the sound of a lift opening. What's that noise? Bing! Oh, that's the sound of you having to be searched by a security officer in a private room. Oh, what's that sound? That's the sound of a plane taking off, and there's no smoking sign coming off. I mean, why? You're walking through an airport.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it sounds like an airport anyway. Why do you have to make it sound more like an airport? I don't understand. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Also, Lord Hermer has decided to give himself even more power so that he can become master of time, space and dimension, as well as being Keir Starmer's best mate. Absolutely unbelievable. Oh, yeah. Also, we're going to be talking about the defection to reform of former Tory chairman Sir Jake Berry. He's on the show as well. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. We've been playing you a series of rather bizarre clips from Keir Starmer's performances yesterday. I was saying it might be time for the men in the white coats. Peter in Norwich says, Mike, the whole of our government have collectively gone mental, crazy, bonkers. I would have the water checked because it seems someone has spiked it with an hallucinogenic. Migration down? What's he talking about? And Linda in Worcestershire says, Mike, Lord Hemorrhoid needs to be removed immediately, along with this anti-British traitorous Labour Party, before the UK is ruined beyond saving. Absolutely right. And Ian in Belfast, Mike, Starmer claims to have raised NHS appointments to 4 million, but previously our doctor would only make appointments for the current week. Now they're booking up to a month ahead. Could this be part of the increase that Starmer claims? Well, it could well be. What my theory is about all of this, 4 million appointments, is that for every appointment you get made, it gets cancelled 3 times. And so in the end, by the 4th time you've got your appointment, it's actually only really 1 million. You know, which is still something, but it's certainly not 4 million. Let's talk to James Price, former government advisor. James, a very good morning to you.
Hello, my friend. Much like you, I think we should be checking the water supply into Downing Street or check what they're smoking or goodness me, because it doesn't seem to bear any reality, any semblance to the reality that we all know.
Well, we were just watching some clips in the first hour. I can maybe play you a shorter one here now of Keir Starmer standing by his manifesto pledges. And when you listen to them, you would not be forgiven for thinking it's time to call in, you know, the doctors, because he's completely and utterly deluded. Have a look at this.
Mr. Speaker, in their manifesto last year, Labour promised not to increase income tax, not to increase national insurance, and not to increase VAT. Does the Prime Minister still stand by his promises?
Yes.
I mean, it does go on a bit after that, but, you know, I think that may be the first time in history that Keir Starmer has actually answered a question.
He then goes on, of course, to not answer whether or not the Labour Party is planning on instituting a wealth tax, which is pretty scary because we've already seen the highest outflow of millionaires, the highest outflow of non-doms, the highest outflow of actually just any kind of hard-working person deciding to leave the country because they're being taxed until the pips squeak. And so if that does happen again, I think we're going to see total and utter catastrophic meltdown of the country. These are people who, after a whole year in office, haven't realised yet that if you put a tax up, you don't necessarily get more money in because people will shift what they do, they'll stop doing it, or in many, many cases, increasingly, they'll just leave. And that's what we're going to have. And I don't think people realise, as I think the Conservatives have started to realise, just how bad the economy is going to be over the next couple of years. And it's going to dwarf, I think, everything else, or it's going to subsume every other issue into it as well, because things are going to become so perilous. And that's what happens every time the Labour Party does run the economy. It does, but this has been absolute record timing, though, hasn't it? I mean, because normally when you look at the Blair-Brown sort of axis, it took them a good sort of 13 years before, or maybe, shall we say, 9, 10, 11 years before suddenly there was an economic crash, which was a worldwide crash, to be fair. And it took them a good, dozen or 12 years or so to reach this point, whereas this lot have done it in 12 months. I mean, everything you look at, which is kind of connected, the front pages this morning saying work doesn't actually pay, you're better off staying on benefits. The Telegraph story saying there's going to be a pub a day closing from now till the end of the year, thanks to Rachel Reeves and her tax raids. The fact that public borrowing has reached such a high extent that, international bodies are now saying you literally can't borrow any more money. It's enough to make you sit down and cry, isn't it? When the last Labour government, between 1997 and 2001, the reason I think they were okay was that in that first Blair term, they kept to all of the Conservative Party's spending restraints. It was only after that next election they said, right, okay, well, we're just going to do what we want now, let the spending flow. Gordon Brown sold off all the gold, ran record deficits during good years, and so we went into that big global financial crash in such a complete mess. And at least Gordon Brown had some sort of semblance of understanding how markets worked, kind of grudgingly. Yeah. You might have thought that, it's all very distasteful, but at least he understood, surprisingly, how some humans actually want to act and how they want to live, whereas this lot don't seem to have a clue. The bit that really scares me, of course, is we've talked about Rachel Reeves previously, and she's lied on her CV about how much experience she's actually got. Of course, she's still probably the best person they have for that role. Starmer already had to put her in place because his previous shadow chancellor was so hapless. Exactly. Who are they going to get in now? Who are they going to get in to try and run things if they do get rid of Rachel Reeves? Because they'll probably keep her on until the next budget, raise a load more taxes that isn't going to bring in any more money, it's going to damage the economy even more, and then swap her out for somebody else. Yeah. What I'm telling people is it's just going to get worse and worse, I'm afraid. Well, exactly. Look at the choices. I mean, you've got Jonathan Reynolds, the fake solicitor, the man who's currently the business secretary with no experience of any business whatsoever. You can't really give it to him. You've obviously got the likes of Darren Jones, who's Rachel Reeves' deputy, who's kind of tainted by her programme of hopelessness, so there's no point in giving it to him. You could look around at people like Lucy Powell, who's blotted her copybook by being so woke and ridiculous about migrants and about the whole situation of immigration. There isn't really one person. I've got a theory, and I'm going to put it to you, which will possibly surprise you and might never come to pass. But my theory is that there will be, because we were told yesterday there's going to be some kind of government away day on Friday, in which there's likely to be some kind of reshuffle begun, if not sort of going on through the whole day. My theory is this, right? Wes Streeting has reached an impasse with the BMA. So they move him. They put him into the Chancellor of the Exchequer's office, and they say, right, you're a coming lad. He's got the support of some of the people in Downing Street, like Morgan McSweeney. They move somebody else out into health so that they can perhaps do a deal with the BMA, because he looks like he's incapable of doing it. And they give Rachel Reeves some kind of honorary position somewhere where she can't do any more damage. Gosh, I mean, stranger things have happened, right? Yeah. And this is the problem when you've got such an untalented team, if that's a word. It's slim pickings. Of course, they might just start giving it all to Lord Hermer, or Lord Hemorrhoid, as you called him earlier on. Which that wasn't my nickname. Somebody else's. It was quite a good one. It's quite a good one. Irritating, can't get rid of it. Yeah, it sort of fits, doesn't it? If the shoe fits.
Absolutely.
I think you might be right on this. Wes Streeting seems to be one of the few people with some talent in that party. He's the guy who abolished NHS England, this massive quango. I've worked in politics for nearly 15 years. I've got no idea what NHS England did as separate from the Department for Health. And of course, Wes Streeting is going to lose his seat at the next election anyway, because there are so many Hamas supporters in that seat that he's definitely going to lose it, as are a bunch of other people in that seat. And so we've got all that to look forward to as well. So might as well give Wes one last nice big job before he loses his seat for the crime of being not a rabid Hamas supporter.
Yeah, absolutely right. And what about this migrant deal with Macron? We still don't really know why Macron was given a state visit. We're not great friends with France. We don't have historic ties with them. If anything, we have historic wars with them. And we're not exactly our greatest friend of the European Union, are they? I mean, even I was told last night. I was reading something this morning at his speech last night. Emmanuel Macron at one point urged Britain to rejoin the European Union, and there was a massive round of applause from all of the people in Guildhall. Of course there was, because they're all the same people. They're all Remainers. They still hate the idea that we've left the European Union, hate the idea that Reform are doing well in the polls. They don't know anything other than to suck up to Europe.
Yeah, quite. I mean, it's 1,000 years of English and then British foreign policy, right? If in doubt, blame the French. It's sort of in our national psyche. There's a lot to admire about the French. I think if I were French, I'd probably be happy to be French, because at least they have a level of cultural self-confidence about themselves still, in the way that I'm not sure I'd be that happy to be German, for example. And the French get a few things really, really right that allows them to get everything else so wrong. You can build houses easily in France. Yeah. You have a lot of cheap nuclear power that is really, really important to prosperity. And I think those sorts of things, a couple of bits like that, allows them to
They also have utter contempt for their politicians, which I think we're beginning to have here.
Yeah, that's true. And they also have utter contempt, actually, despite how much Macron goes on about it, for things like the European Union. Yeah. If they don't like a rule, they just ignore it, which is why Euroscepticism is so much lower in France than it is here, where you've just got huge numbers of civil servants who say, oh, we absolutely must do what Brussels say. That's what used to happen. We've got the same thing now with the ECHR. And this kind of migrant deal, I had to make sure this wasn't satire. Right. That Keir Starmer walked into a room, said, right, Emmanuel, it's going to be 1 in, 1 out. And it left being what?
17 in, 1 out, yeah.
I honestly had to check that wasn't a satire. It's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, this is the guy we've got negotiating for us on the world stage, right? And we've got to go and get more trade deals thanks to Starmer. He's got to go and, as you say, lead negotiations with the BMA and the junior doctors and all these sorts of things. And we are led by absolute clowns. At least Macron has some kind of sense of grandeur and confidence about him, even if I disagree with almost everything he said and done. And he himself, by the way, of course, domestically is a lame duck because he'd lost control in Parliament and is sort of basically just treading water for the next 2 years before probably someone from the Front National or the Rassemblement National, the hard right party, comes in and starts to fix some of their social problems, because we think we've got it tough in Britain. Look at the number of Islamist attacks in France. Yeah. Look at the number of churches being set fire to, including Notre Dame. And they don't say what happened there, but given all the other churches that have been set fire to by Islamists, and the priests who've been beheaded by Islamists, and the people in nightclubs who've been shot up by Islamists, France has a really big problem there. I think their population of Islamists is a lot higher than ours, and so the taste of things to come if we don't sort out that problem here.
Well, you remember what happened with the Bataclan all those years back in 2015. There was a town, I think it was in Belgium, which was literally a no-go area for the police. It was basically run by Islamist gangs, and that was where the whole of the Bataclan shooters came from.
Yeah. Do you think we've got confidence that Starmer's going to be able to fix those sorts of problems here in the UK, when you're not actually allowed to say mean things on Twitter? But the Labour Party is pushing through, by the way, a definition of Islamophobia that will basically brook no criticism of one specific religion. And we know the reason why that is, because the adherents, or many adherents, of that religion of peace are the ones who say, if you criticise us, we'll kill you, we'll chop your head off. Not by far all Muslims, obviously. The moderate majority are probably the biggest victims of crime in that community. But it's one of those things now that Starmer has obviously buried his head in the sand worried about losing half his cabinet at the next election to Hamas parties. We've seen Zara Sultana, that moron, and the magic grandpa Jeremy Corbyn go and try and do their own party. We've got all of these problems to come, and we should be looking at the way that France is failing to deal with them rather than the way that France is failing to deal just with the migrants alone.
Yeah, it is absolutely incredible. So many problems, one after another, just keep arriving, like a sort of conveyor belt of problems for Keir Starmer, and yet he still kind of deludes himself in the House of Commons and tells us it's all going brilliantly. I mean, he actually made, I'm not even going to bother playing it, but he made a little statement yesterday talking about how, you know, business confidence is higher than ever, you know, we're creating more jobs than ever, you know, the economy is the best in the G7. It's like a man who's literally going round and round in circles inside of his own, you know, padded cell.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's why, although I think that may upset some people here, why I think that reform is not the answer, certainly not yet, because they've got no interest, it seems, in actually thinking about why these things have gone wrong. It's the reason that Farage is riding high right now, because he's able to talk at length about things. And all of that Labour front bench, particularly Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, and that ghastly Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, who's trying to destroy children's lives, all they seem to be able to do is talk, as you say, Mike, in pre-prepared sound bites, like there's a civil servant off to the side saying, just say this thing, right? Yeah. That seems to be how it is. They've got no humanity, no understanding of the real world. And we need politicians in an age of social media who are able to actually communicate properly with people.
It's a very cynical way of dealing with things as well, because it's almost as though some spin doctors told them, if you just keep saying it, the stupid people at the back, i.e. the public and the people who vote for them, will just remember that, and then they'll vote for you again. Absolutely shocking. Thank you very much indeed. James Price, an awful lot of common sense coming out from you. A bit of breaking news for you. I'm not sure if I understand this. Royal Mail will be allowed to scrap Saturday deliveries for second-class post and switch to an alternate weekday service instead from July the 28th. What does that mean? So does that mean when you go and post a letter on, say, Wednesday, and you say, when they say, well, how would you like to send it? And you go, well, I don't know, second class, when will it get there? A couple of days? And they'll go, well, normally it would get there by Friday, but you never be sure, so Saturday maybe, but we don't have a service on a Saturday now, so you're able to choose an alternative weekday service. So what, next Monday maybe? What, Tuesday? Does it take a week? Well, I don't know. What does it mean? Let's get a voice note from Judith.
Good morning, Mike. It's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. Regarding the doctors' strike, the junior doctors' strike, I worked as a nurse in health service for over 25 years, and I always had a great deal of sympathy for junior doctors. They were always the Cinderellas of the health service. So I personally was glad when they got that last big pay rise. I thought they deserved it. I've always defended them. But this time, they're losing my sympathy altogether. They can't expect another massive pay rise after that big one. They just can't. I think the Doctors' Union has been taken over by a load of left-wing people who just want to strike for the sake of striking. If I lose sympathy with them, well, I think most people will. Thank you.
Judith, what a very sensible and, as ever, brilliant contribution to the show. She is like every ordinary person in this country who doesn't like unfairness. And if people are being treated unfairly, we in this country generally like to stand up for them. But in this case, it is not the doctors who are being treated unfairly, it's the bleeding patients who are being treated unfairly. 200,000 appointments and procedures will be cancelled, minimum. Possibly as many as 500,000 will be cancelled, minimum, because of this junior doctor strike, which is taking place very, very soon, and later in about 2 weeks' time, for 5 whole days. And it's absolutely shameful. We'll be talking to one of these junior doctors coming up. I think we'll play them what Judith actually had to say. 7:21, Richard Tice coming next.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board our EasyJet service. Please place your large bags into the overhead locker, wheels first, and keep your small items under the seat in front of you.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:24. How about this, says Pete in Norwich. Sounds at an airport. No visa, no worries. Come on in. And then another one from Richard on the Costa del Sol. How about this for an airport sound? Brace, brace, brace. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, this is for those of you who haven't, if you only just joined us, you don't know what we're talking about. Heathrow Airport, apparently, starting this Tuesday, past Tuesday, 2 days ago, have launched a new ambient sound inside the airport. It's, guess what? The sounds of an airport. They're already in an airport. What's wrong with them? You know, this is like peak 2025 Britain, it has to be said. Let's talk to Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Richard, very good morning to you.
Well, a very good morning to you indeed, Mike. And we're delighted to welcome Sir Jake Berry to the Reform family.
Yes, I mean, it's quite an extraordinary move, isn't it? Former chairman of the Tory party, because not only is he coming in to say that he thinks Reform is the only party that can save Britain, but he actually admits to being part of the destruction of it when he was at Tory HQ.
Well, he's right that Reform is the only party that can save Britain, and I think people quite like it when politicians admit if they got things wrong, apologise, and say this is now how we're going to fix it. And in a sense, that's who we are at Reform. We've got serious plans how to fix things. I'm afraid your previous commentator, James Price, is completely wrong. The reason that we're leading in all of the national polls is that we actually have got the solutions to the country's problems. And I would just gently remind people like him that it was me 15 months ago that stood at a press conference in April 2024 and said that Net Stupid Zero was going to cost £30 billion of taxpayers' cash every single year. And guess what? 2 days ago, the OBR said, Tice is right. It's 30 billion a year of the cost of net zero. So actually, for those of us who criticise our economics, maybe you want to look at the facts and look at the reality, which is our numbers are pretty much bang on.
Well, I must say, I'm not one of those people that criticises your economics, because the economics of any political party up until now, from the whole beginning of this century, have been so awful that we're all saddled with more debt than we've ever seen in our entire lives. I mean, ever since, you know, the dawn of the Iron Chancellor Gordon Brown, who sold off the gold, you know, at its lowest point as opposed to at its highest point, the man who sort of, you know, gave Fred the Shred, and, you know, a knighthood, and watched Nat West literally crash and burn before his very eyes, you know, and then we had George Osborne. Then we had, you know, the ridiculous, you know, useless, hopeless chancellors in Tory government. I don't think anyone's got any right to say anything about it.
And these are the supposed experts, the supposed gurus with their PPEs from Oxford or Cambridge, their think tanks, their SPAD experience. Maybe they've actually completely knackered and ruined the country. And maybe the country is polling for a reform because they realise we need some fresh thinking, some wisdom, some experience from the real world, from normal life.
Well, let's have a quick look at Jake Berry. We'll be speaking to him later on in the show, but let's have a look at what he had to say last night.
Britain is broken. We literally live in a country where you cannot walk down the street with a phone in your hand. We have taxes that are so sky high, the brightest and best are leaving our country in droves, while at the same time a benefit system that is bringing the world's poor to our shores with no control. If you literally want to design a system to destroy a country, you would struggle to do better. And I know who broke it, because I was there. For 30 years, I supported the Conservative Party. For 14 years, I was one of their MPs, sitting at that cabinet table twice. And I want to tell you today, my friends, that I have come to a decision. The old parties do not have what it takes to transform our country, to build a Britain we can believe in again. And that's why I've decided to join the Reform Party. It is only Reform and Nigel Farage who can deliver a Britain that we are proud of again.
And, I mean, he makes a very good argument. Is he going to have a role in the party? Is it clear what he's going to do? Does he want to be an MP?
Well, we're only in day 2, Mike, so give us a chance. But the great thing about Sir Jake is he's got a lot of experience. And let's wait and see. But when people say to us, "Well, you're still growing, and have you got the experience to know how to organise things?" Well, actually, bringing in that level of experience of the blob and the hurdles that they'll try and put in front of us is going to be very valuable. We're already seeing it with the 10 councils that we are running, where we're starting to make real progress in stopping ludicrous spending, but we're also seeing the efforts of the blob. And some of you couldn't make up some of the stuff that's going on, where you see briefing papers and you say, well, hang on, half the information that I want isn't there. It's missing. You have to sort of read between the lines and then go back and ask. And there's a deliberate withholding of critical information by executives. So that's what we're dealing with. But I think we're going to surprise a lot of people. Just watch this space over the coming months.
I'll tell you a story that slightly disturbs me this morning, Richard, and it's the one in the Telegraph about Lord Hermer, who seems to think that the law is the answer to everything. He's basically inserted a whole load of new clauses inside guidelines to lawyers in this country, in which he says that any government minister making policy should be subject to a legal review, which basically means that he believes that any government policy, whether it's yours or the Labour Party's or the Conservative Party's policy, should be subject to a legal kind of study to see whether or not it's lawful.
Well, in reality, they sort of do that already, because they're supposed to carry out an impact assessment of all their policies. I actually come from the school of thought, which is that at the end of the day, advisors advise and directors decide. And it's the same in running a government. People can give all the advice they want, but ultimately it's the ministers, the Secretary of State, and ultimately the Prime Minister who have to make decisions, having looked at the range of advice. And sometimes you have to take a bit of a risk on things and see how it goes. That's what you do in the world of business. You take a risk, you monitor it, you see how it's going. Where it's going well, great, double down and accelerate on it. And if it needs a bit of tweaking, if it's not quite right, then you adapt and you adjust. You don't try and cover it up. And I think that we should be running the country in the same way that you run a business, where ultimately you've got to earn more than you spend. Otherwise, you go bust. And that's the horror that faces the UK at the moment. We saw it with the terrifying report from the OBR just a couple of days ago, saying that Britain's finances are right on the edge and we're vulnerable.
Absolutely right. Well, I mean, you'll also appreciate, given that, the numbers game isn't one that the Labour Party played terribly well. Keir Starmer walked into a room with Emmanuel Macron yesterday, hoping to do a deal for 1 in, 1 out on the migrant front. He ends up with 17 in and 1 out.
You couldn't make this up. I mean, how bad is that? I see you chuckling away. It is laughable because it's so bonkers. And what this is going to create is a whole new industry in fake family links and relationships and liaisons between the illegal migrants and supposed long-lost loved ones and family members in the UK. You can see it, you can sense it. It's utterly ludicrous. And that's why, again, reforms policy, you've got to leave the ECHR, scrap the ludicrous Human Rights Act, stop the lefty lawyers, and then we've got to return everybody to France. We know it works. The effective equivalent worked in Australia just over a decade ago. We've got to pick up and take back, and France are failing in their legal obligation to do that, and it requires courageous leaders to do the same, and that's who we are and what we'll do.
Well, also, I mean, ridiculous as it was, I mean, the original idea of 1 in, 1 out was pointless anyway. I mean, without wishing to be too frivolous, I mean, you guys are operating a 1 in, 1 out policy at the moment quite successfully, aren't you?
Well, you can be frivolous all you want, but look at the cabinet MPs, former Tory MPs that are now seeing sense. And yeah, I just think that when you look at the polls, you look at the hundreds of councillors you've got, you look at the fact that we're now leading the polls in Wales. Sure, we're a political disruptor, and we're moving at great speed. And of course, you get bumps in the road, but ultimately, we've got the nous and the courage and the right policies to ride over the bumps and make great progress. And what I'm really struck by every day is people stopping me on the street and saying, please keep going, please keep battling on. And that's absolutely what we're going to do.
Yeah. And what about what happened yesterday in the Houses of Parliament? I mean, I saw you sitting next to Nigel Farage there when he was heckled. Let's just have a quick look at what happened.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The main reason this country
Some of you want to get in a little later. If this takes forever, you won't get in. Nigel Farage.
Thank you. The main reason this country wisely voted for Brexit back in 2016, and that included millions of Labour supporters, is because we wanted to take back control of our borders so that we and we alone could decide who comes and settles in our country. Does the Prime Minister understand that that demand today is even greater than it was back in 2016, and that we demand, the country demands, that you say to the French President, will you shut up?
Don't be so disrespectful.
You say to the French President, we will not accept undocumented males across the English Channel, and that you are not dictated to by an increasingly arrogant, anti-Brexit French President.
I mean, it's pathetic, isn't it? It really is pathetic, and it doesn't look as if Lindsay Hoyle is that bothered about it.
Yeah, it was a pretty chaotic scene, and I think that the very strange things were going on with the microphones and the speakers, because the MP behind us, he was basically continually interrupting and shouting.
This is the guy from Dewsbury, right?
I could barely hear Nigel myself, and then we had another Lib Dem from over my left shoulder shouting, and it was a deliberate attempt to disrupt Nigel, but quite rightly he carried on, and ultimately this has done us another huge favour. People realise that in a sense the Commons is trying to prevent Nigel from being heard, and I think people find that very distasteful.
Yeah, I think they do, and again, it's just more grist to the mill, really, for people who are fed up to the back teeth of the establishment politics in this country, and people who can't seem to even give each other the time of day. It's nonsensical. Richard, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Coming up, we've got loads more of your calls, loads of great messages coming in. Steve says, I think it's obvious now that Starmer's government is carrying out an act of deliberate sabotage on this country's economy and society to leave a scorched earth at the next election. Let's get a voice note from Sam.
Good morning, Mike. I think with Keir Starmer and everything that's been going on, and all the lies and the breakdown in the promises of pretty much everything, I think there's two records, political British records, that have been broken here. One, as you've said before, and as a lot of us have said, Keir Starmer has pretty much almost destroyed his party and the country within 12 months, and the Tories took 13 years. And the other political record is Nigel Farage's party for a new fully formed party to gain this much ground in this space of time is unprecedented.
I think you're absolutely right, Sam. There is obviously, and we've been saying it for a long time, a bit of a revolution going on behind the scenes, and it's being missed by an awful lot of people in Westminster. I actually heard, I think it was Peter Cardwell that told us yesterday on the Drive Time show that we ended up doing with Jeremy Kyle, that he was speaking to somebody in Westminster, a seasoned MP, who said to him after the elections in May, they didn't see it coming. They didn't see Reform doing as well as they did. And you just think, well, what sort of world are you living in? What sort of world are you dealing with? And who are you talking to? Because if you didn't see that coming, you've got no business being in politics, for heaven's sake. 7:38.
Across the UK, on and DAB+. On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:39. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through from now until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along. Those airport people pumping in the sounds of planes, says Kenny in Edinburgh, could be onto something. Why don't we try it in Parliament with sounds pumped in of Keir Starmer being honest? Well, that could be something. And one here from Trish. My daughter works for NHS Dental. She had to register an asylum family of 7 yesterday. They live 40 miles from the surgery, so a taxi was paid for them to bring them in and to take them home. And not one of them could fill in their details. This is happening on a daily basis. Well, you know, everybody knows what the problems are going on in all sorts of places in all parts of the NHS, but certainly having enough money isn't one of them. But, of course, we've been told now, on the front page of the Daily Express this morning, there is going to be a junior doctor strike July 25th for 5 days. They're basically going to be out of work. According to estimates this morning, because of what happened last time they went on strike, a minimum of 200,000 appointments and procedures will be cancelled. And of course there will be knock-on effects for the week before, the week after, possibly the month after. Let's have a look at what Wes Streeting had to say yesterday.
The BMA's ballot result from resident doctors is in, and it's really disappointing that despite the fact that a majority of resident doctors didn't actually vote for strike action, the BMA are now preparing for strike action. And it's completely unnecessary, not least because since this government came to office, resident doctors have had a pay rise of 28.9%, and this year alone had the highest pay award of the entire public sector.
That's Wes Streeting, Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, who told us last year that he'd solved the problem of the junior doctors in the NHS, and clearly he hasn't. Let's talk to Basha Mukherjee, who is a junior doctor who voted to strike. Basha, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, is he right? He says it's totally unnecessary what you're doing.
Look, Wes Streeting still has time to turn this around, and he showed great initiative last year in being very proactive to put the strikes to end. And the deal at the time was that we would go towards full pay restoration to the levels of 2008. And that hasn't really kept up. We were happy to stop striking a year ago, 6 to 8 months ago. And that can still happen. Even now it can still happen. We've still got a few days left before the strikes, and it can still happen in between the strikes. None of us really want to strike. We don't want to be in this position. But the alternative is worse. The alternative, what I worry about, the dwindling numbers of people who have voted against striking, is that have they given up? And have they given up on the government? Have they given up on the NHS? And are they now considering, which a lot of us are, in fact, we get lucrative offers, job offers consistently from Australia, New Zealand. I've had a few myself that are recruiting with much better pay, much better conditions. And I worry that this is happening to a lot of doctors who are just giving up on the government and they just want to defect.
But last year, he says, you got a 28.9% pay rise, right? So a lot of people have said to me this year, you know, they didn't mind last year. They accepted that your, pay had not been kept up with because of all the different levels of inflation that had come along. And, you know, not everyone was supportive last year, but a lot of people said, fair enough, give them 22%, rising to 28.9%. But everyone now that I talk to this year says you're being greedy, you're asking for too much, and in the current economic climate, you shouldn't be doing that. It's irresponsible. And you're putting people's lives at risk by possibly going on strike.
So, I mean, the numbers are a little bit more complicated than, you know, what we're just talking about here. So
did you not get, you didn't get a 28.9% pay rise last year?
We did, but the point is the base number, and the dispute is about what the strikes were about was about restoration, pay restoration. And I urge people who are indeed worried about this to go and look at the information at the base level to understand what exactly the junior doctors are striking for. Ultimately, we were asking, prior to the strikes, the numbers were £12 to £15 an hour for a junior doctor, and that had gone up to about £17 to £19 an hour. And the original ask was always
but what's the actual annual salary?
An hour.
Yeah, but you used pounds an hour because it sounds better, don't you? What's your actual annual? What's your annual salary, and what did it go up by?
I wouldn't like to disclose my annual salary.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? You're asking for public money. You're asking for me and all other taxpayers to contribute to your salary. So I think we're entitled to know what it is.
Well, for my records, I'm actually going to be, I'm going to stop being a resident doctor by the end of the month. So these strikes won't really affect me. I'm actually not even going to be striking because
But you voted to strike, though. It says here.
I voted for striking, yes.
But you're not going to strike.
My reasons are different to just the numbers per se. My reasons are that the NHS continues to be a very chronically understaffed environment, and we need to make it lucrative and incentivized for doctors to stay in the NHS, to come into the NHS.
But you're not going to stay in it?
Well, I'm considering my options because even the pays for salaried GPs is not great at the moment, and there are better options across the world. I could be doing the same job anywhere else in the world.
Okay, well then why not do that then instead of causing problems here?
Well, this is what's happening, and if you just imagine the 5 days of junior doctor strike, the effect that's creating, and think about all the doctors that are leaving the NHS, that are going off on sick pay, they're going off to do other jobs because the NHS is not paying enough.
But the BMA limits the number of people who can qualify as doctors every single year, doesn't it?
Just repeat that question for me.
The BMA limits the numbers of people who can qualify as doctors every year. There's a shortage of doctors, and yet there are doctors who are working or who are qualified to work in GP surgeries who can't go to GP surgeries because they can't be hired because they're too expensive. You know, there's all sorts of problems. But I'm slightly puzzled as to why you're no longer going to be a junior doctor, but you voted to strike as one.
So the point is it's not true that there's not enough. There are enough doctors. There's actually not enough places, not enough job places. Even though there are so many openings, there are lots of GP trainees and GPs who are out of work at the moment just because of the structure and and everything that there is.
But those are not what you're striking about, right? You're not striking about GPs. You're striking about junior doctors.
It's a whole NHS problem, though, isn't it? The point is that we're struggling to staff the NHS adequately with doctors, and that includes junior doctors and resident doctors, who make up a huge part of the NHS already, and they're not remunerated enough, and they're defecting, and that's what we're trying to stop here. We're trying to retain doctors. We're trying to, stop the doctors leaving the NHS, essentially.
Yeah, but you're leaving, though, aren't you?
I haven't made that decision yet.
Oh, I thought you said you weren't any longer going to be a junior doctor.
I'm qualifying as a GP, so I'm not going to be a resident doctor anymore. That means...
Why did you change the name, by the way, from junior doctors to resident doctors? What's the difference?
Well, I suppose there was... well, I didn't personally do it. It was the decision made by the government and between the BMA.
No, you're here... Well, I'm just asking you as the collective representative of the junior doctors.
I suppose the term junior doctor creates some sort of confusion amongst patients as to the level of experience. For example, whenever I'm introducing myself, I used to introduce myself as a junior doctor, even though I'd be doing more or less the same job as a GP, even though I am a trainee, but I'm still doing the same job, seeing the same number of patients, probably hold the similar amount of experience or high levels of experience. And this goes for lots and lots of resident doctors who are very, very experienced, but they were stuck with this term that they had to introduce themselves as, or people would know them as. And that then kind of undermines their talent, undermines the level of experience that they have. So when you say resident doctor, it doesn't sound like someone who doesn't know what they're doing or something like that, or inexperienced.
All right. Well, let's have a listen to this. This is a caller of ours, a listener who's been listening to us for a very long time, former NHS worker called Judith.
I worked as a nurse in health service for over 25 years, and I always had a great deal of sympathy for junior doctors. They were always the Cinderellas of the health service. I've always defended them. But this time, they're losing my sympathy. They can't expect another massive pay rise after that big one. They just can't. If I lose sympathy with them, well, I think most people will. Thank you.
So, I mean, I get that a lot from people. You know, last year, fair enough. This year, not so fair.
I hear that, and I think that's showing up in the numbers as well. However, this is a conversation between the government and the junior doctors, and ultimately what the alternatives far worse, which is losing these doctors, going across to the other part of the world. And the government's already been trying to replace junior doctors with other staff that are not medically trained in the same way. So and this is already happening because there is a shortage of staff members. So the point is, patients who want to see doctors are not going to see doctors, they're going to see other staff members instead. So if you want to retain staff as doctors,
yeah, but you know the situation
of doctors, then...
but the situation is not in isolation, is it? You're not just working for the government or for the taxpayer or for yourselves. You know, you're working in the public sector, which is under pressure. You know, you're asking for money when the Labour government's trying to cut the welfare bill, trying to take away disability benefits. They're trying to take benefits away from children with their special educational needs. Do you really want to be remembered for actually taking money from the taxpayer, which could have gone to children with special educational needs?
Well, that's the government's job to find where the money needs to come from. This is a question of what it means at the base level.
In other words?
I absolutely care that money needs to go where it's fair, but staff need to be paid.
Well, do you think it's fair
fairly
to give it to doctors when they could be giving it to kids with special educational needs?
Well, there's enough money going around, and I'm sure you'll agree that there's a lot of wastage and a lot of waste of money that's been going on for
There's an awful lot of wastage, much of it in the NHS, to be honest, but not in the clinical side of it. And maybe you should find out where that wastage is and tell the government, just take it from there. And everybody be happy instead of asking for extra.
That's of the people who are getting the big checks within the NHS to figure out where the wastage is, and perhaps that is one of the steps. It's not going to be easy to fix it overnight because it's been breaking for many years.
It has. Absolutely right. I've always said that somebody inside the NHS should fix it. Maybe the doctors could. Pasha Mukherjee, thank you very much indeed. A junior doctor who voted to strike, even though she's not going to go on strike because she's not actually a junior doctor anymore. She's going to be a GP. All very confusing, isn't it? I wouldn't give him a penny. This is Talk.
We have to look at these reforms in the whole, in the round. So clearly they're designed to process people more quickly, but perhaps more significantly to put more people into the community. And of course our probation service isn't being dealt with. It's not getting more funds, yet they are going to have to deal with more people. And of course in prison, we're still not doing rehabilitation. It's a golden opportunity to teach people a trade, whether it's plumbing, woodwork, whatever it happens to be.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:53. Goodness me, I don't know where the time goes. It is, of course, the home of common sense right here. We've been talking about junior doctors. We've been talking about how it doesn't pay to work anymore. You might as well just go on benefits. And also, of course, the amazing deal that's just been struck by Keir Starmer with Emmanuel Macron. It's not so much 1 in, 1 out. It's more like 17 in and 1 out. The other mad story we've got this morning is the discovery yesterday that Heathrow Airport, as of this week, is playing airport noises to people as they go through the airport. So I thought, a man that spends more time in airports than probably anybody else I know has got to be Simon Calder, travel correspondent, guru, in fact, of The Independent, and our personal sort of travel guide I would say, and has been for many years here at Talk. Simon, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Yes, unfortunately, I'm not actually in an airport this morning, although I have been enjoying the Heathrow music, which, is going to be rolling out across the UK's biggest airport over the coming days, and it will spend all summer putting us in the mood for holidays, apparently.
Yeah, well, apparently it don't matter if you're not in an airport, because you can just presumably get a copy of this music. Not really music, but it's just noises of an airport to play when you're not at an airport. I mean, I understand if you love airports that much, you play it when you're at home and think of your time at the airport. But if you're actually in the airport, hearing the noises of the airport, why do you need to have fake noises from a different airport to help you along?
Well, the thing is, I've listened to this music. It's 4 minutes 26 seconds, so it's a longish single, but it's going to be on a continuous loop.
On a loop, yeah.
And the idea is it's actually mostly tiddly-dee music with a few odd sounds in it. And the idea is you make everybody feel calm, but at the same time excited about their trip. And yes, it's, I think, an interesting move. It's not original, Mike, because 20 years ago, Gatwick did exactly the same. If you are familiar with Pier 6, this is at North Terminal at Gatwick Airport. If you've ever been there, if you get sent on that incredibly big long escalator and then walk across this bridge over an active taxiway, that has had ambient music since 2005. So Heathrow's kind of catching up here.
Yeah. I'm usually rushing, so I don't normally have that much time to listen to the ambient sounds as I'm trying to get to the gate before they shut it, But I have to say, I mean, a couple of people have been very, as you might expect, very creative. This one from Peter in Croydon, who says, "Morning, Mike. Ray, airport noises. What about the sound of drunk passengers fighting or a little child whining all the time? I mean, any of that on there?"
Well, no, you haven't got that. You haven't got the no sounds of going through the security search and being asked, "Did you pack your bag yourself?" No sound of, "Oh, you can't take this through here, sir." Right. And so that's slightly less realistic. And I'm all in favour of anything which is creative. There's no sound, by the way, of a mobile phone ringing in the bedroom of Thomas Walby, the chief executive. Because you'll recall on that terrible day in March when the airport shut down all day, he was slumbering gently because they couldn't wake him up because his phone was switched to silent.
Right. So well, some people say that wasn't the only reason they couldn't wake him up, but that's another story.
So look, there's it's good that they're trying something new. The airlines would say, how can you be wasting money on this? You're already the most expensive airport in the world. Just get on with running a decent service.
And just try not to shut it down every now and again whenever there's a power cut.
Well, and Heathrow will say, actually, we are doing stuff, and they've just also announced that they're using AI to operate the airport even more efficiently, and that means they will be getting people more smoothly to their destinations this summer. But they won't be doing that to Italy today because, of course, a whole range of strikes going on, lots of cancellations to particularly Milan, Naples and Venice, due to airport workers at the Italian end. It's going to be a tough old summer, but there's some soothing music while you learn that your flight is either first delayed and then cancelled.
Well, one for the musos, I can reveal to you that I've got, actually, I think I got it when it came out, Brian Eno's album, which is called Music for Airports. Which is quite pleasant to listen to, but it doesn't have any actual airport noises. It's just a bit of music composition, which is what it should be. I think I'd rather have that than noises of an airport which I'm actually in.
Yes, I think airport music, music for airports. Brian Eno apparently credited with starting the whole ambient music genre back in 1979 when we were barely children at that stage. And of course, any airports are stressful places, like prisons, like hospitals. You want to get out of them as soon as possible. So if you've got some soothing music while that's going on, that's I think probably a useful thing.
Okay.
as it's not getting in people's way and annoying them.
Well, indeed, that's exactly right. We try not to get annoyed, because it's also a place where you do get annoyed. Simon Calder, thank you very much indeed, travel correspondent at The Independent. This from Alan in Middlesbrough. The heckling of Nigel Farage yesterday was absolutely disgraceful, which was being tolerated by Lindsay Hoyle. To be fair, he might have been on his phone booking a couple of first-class flights in a luxury hotel on expenses in the Maldives to notice. Yeah, I see what you did there. Lots more to come in the next hour. We're going to be talking to Peter Hitchens, columnist at the Mail on Sunday, of course. Also, we'll talk to a spokesman for the British Beer and Pub Association. They're going to be closing one pub every day between now and the end of the year, thanks to Rachel Reeves. Cheers, Rachel. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people, because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
Here goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
And apparently,
that's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham, and we are, of course, the home of common sense, here with you all the way through every single weekday morning from 6 until 10. It's Thursday, the 10th of July. We are edging ever closer to the weekend. We still seem to be smack bang in the middle, or possibly nearing the end, of the Anglo-French summit, which has been going on for a couple of days. We've already seen a very extravagant banquet, which took place over in Windsor, where King Charles, I should say, declared Britain to have no border with France anymore, because we're all part of this one marvellous globalist community, to which I said, well, somebody pointed out, if you haven't got a kingdom, you don't really need a king. And if you haven't got borders, you haven't really got a kingdom at all. A lot of people are a bit critical of the lavishness of this particular banquet, which is said to have cost somewhere near £500,000 to be put on. Pictures in the Sun of Emmanuel Macron winking at Princess Kate. I don't know what that means, but nobody quite knows exactly why he was here. Nobody quite knows exactly what he is doing. But they, of course, have now done what they're hailing as an historic deal between Britain and France to deal with the migrant problem. It was started off as a one-in, one-out deal. It's It's now become 17 in and 1 out, which is not quite so good. A kick in the galls is what it says on the front page of The Sun. France will take back only 50 dinghy migrants a week under a new returns deal, a fraction of the huge numbers crossing, which, as you know from our migrant tracker, is edging ever closer to 45,000 ever since Labour have been in office since the beginning of July of last year. Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph go with proof work doesn't pay. Under Labour, sickness benefits to be worth £2,500 a year, more than the minimum wage job that you could get. So it's a disincentive to work, basically, in this country. And you have to say, who can blame anyone who's told to go back to work if, one, there aren't really any jobs for them to go to, and two, they can actually make more money being on benefits. There is absolutely no point to it, is there? 0344 499 1000. Also this morning, an awful lot of fury around the junior doctor strike, which is due to kick off on July the 25th. I just spoke to a junior doctor who said she's not going to be a junior doctor for much longer. She voted to strike, even though she's not going to be on strike. So it's all a bit of a political manoeuvre, it seems, to corner Wes Streeting into a place where he can't escape. And I wonder whether or not, actually, it's all a ruse just to try and get more money. Of course, the government says they haven't got any. There's going to be a standoff. Who knows if it's going to come to anything at all? But we'll take your views on it. 0344 499 1000. Be interested to know if you did have an appointment or you did have some kind of procedure booked for some time this month, whether or not it's still going ahead. Because, of course, Keir Starmer, as you know, continues to boast, we've got 4 million more appointments. We're fixing the NHS. They broke it, and luckily we're fixing it. Let's get a voice note from Kim.
How to solve the problem with the doctors. This will take a few years, and yes, it will cause us some pain. But if there's one thing the British public have shown, we know how to deal with pain. We've been doing it for the last however many decades. Remove the cap on the number of people that can train to become a doctor, and let anybody that wants to go to Australia or Canada go. Their population is roughly the same as that of the UK. They only need so many doctors. Once all those positions have gone, the power that the current doctors believe they have will have vanished. And then we can dictate the terms. Simple.
Very simple, Kim. Thank you very much indeed. And, of course, all they do, the junior doctors who want to go on strike, is talk about how much they get paid per hour, because they know that that is a bit of a misleading set of statistics, as in course that it always is. We've got loads more to do. Peter Hitchens is here from the Mail on Sunday. We'll take loads more of your voice notes, as well as talking about the bizarre nature of why Heathrow Airport has decided to start running a tape of an airport as it would sound if you were walking through one, while you're actually walking through one. Peak 2025, really, isn't it? This is Morning Glory, the home of common sense. Let's get it on. Diana in London says, what about customers who have flying anxiety? Surely airport noises will only add to their anxiety prior to their flight. Well, you might think that. And here's one from Stuart in Perthshire. Mike, ha ha ha, he says, I can just imagine going home and looking through the music collection. Dark Side of the Moon, no. Wish You Were Here, nah. Heathrow Concerto No. 5. Yes, that would be the one. A bit of breaking news for you. A man has died after being stabbed to death outside a casino in Knightsbridge, one of London's poshest areas. Police have set up a crime scene outside of the Park Tower Luxury Hotel and Casino last night. No arrests have been made at this stage, but investigations are ongoing. What I can tell you is that just in this week alone, on Wednesday, Sadiq Khan announced a policing blitz on London's 20 most blighted town centres for shoplifting, robbery, knife crime and antisocial behaviour. They basically said summer is one of the busiest times of the year for our police, with a large number of people out and about on our high streets and towns. But the safety of our town centres is not just about policing, it's about building stronger, more connected communities where everyone feels secure. Well, I'll tell you what, you don't feel very secure in Knightsbridge, and if you don't feel secure in Knightsbridge, you can't really feel secure anywhere. Peter Hitchens is here. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I mean, I'm not surprised at this latest stabbing, because we've got somebody here who lives in Knightsbridge who's in the last sort of 3 months been chased down the road by a man waving a machete at her and has had her phone and her bag snatched from her at various times. So Knightsbridge is a real hotbed of crime at the moment.
Well, everywhere is a potential place of crime now, for many reasons. One, the police have vanished from our sight and are not to be seen, and long ago gave up their job of patrolling on foot, so the streets became unsafe and bad people became used to the fact they could get away with doing bad things. On top of that, there's the crazy licensing of electric motorbikes and electric scooters, which is perfect. All of them are unplated, so you can't trace them and able to weave off into alleyways and back streets at speed. A perfect vehicle for the mugger and the telephone snatcher and all the other kind of people who range through our streets, and also the complete failure of the police to do anything about the spread of the highly dangerous drug marijuana, increasingly associated with severe mental illness and violent crime. So the streets, even Knightsbridge is not immune from this. I don't see why it should be, obviously, because given the number of wealthy people who might be seen around there, it offers targets to the wicked.
Pickings,
so I'm not surprised. We don't know anything about this case, but all those things together simply make it more likely that anybody will be a victim of crime if they expose themselves to the street. And that's what we are becoming, and it will, I'm afraid, get worse. Everything I read this morning gave me a strong impression that we're living in the final years of liberal Britain and liberal Europe. None of it works.
Yeah.
Crime increases. People are being paid to stay away from work. Our borders have ceased to exist. And when Prince Charles says there's no border between France and Britain, he's right in a way. If I go to the Eurostar terminals, go to Paris, and suggest that I can go to France without showing my passport, I don't think the French police are going to pay much attention to the King and his remarks. But if I turn up on the French coast, determined to take a rubber boat to England, and I will get there as far as I can see, because there is no border to that extent. The whole of Europe has become borderless, which is itself a lawless act promoted by the European Union for many years under its Schengen Agreement, and now leading to almost total chaos. So we have those things happening, and we also have an economy which is out of control, and we're spending so much money that we're, as I constantly point out to people, we're actually raising tax to pay interest on our loans, and then we're borrowing more money to pay interest on those loans. These are the actions of someone well down the road to bankruptcy. And nations aren't supposed to go bankrupt, but I'm afraid they can do, and I think we're heading that way, and much of Europe the same direction. So I just look at it and I see, if in 30 or 40 years' time, when people are showing the films of these events, they're going to say, look at these people dancing on the edge of a volcano. They had no idea what was about to hit them. And I don't think they do.
No, I don't think they do. And Kemi Badenoch yesterday described Britain as a welfare state with an economy attached. The piece on the front page of the Mail today, saying, you know, it doesn't really pay to actually go to work under Labour,
well,
and it hasn't for a long time.
Whose fault is that? I mean, she was in governments which pushed us towards this position. It's been going on for many, many years now, and no one's really done anything to put a stop to it. And the ridiculous acceptance of all kinds of subjective complaints as real diseases hasn't helped either. So here we have it, and there is no coherent, serious opposition to it. So we will continue to hurtle towards whatever strange fate lies in store for us.
Yeah, because it doesn't add up, does it? Because at the end of the day, if you end up with more people on benefits of one kind or another than you have of people paying tax, and as more and more people leave the country, that becomes a smaller and smaller number. The sums simply don't add up, and there will come a time, I think, because we've seen it before, haven't we, in the 70s, where international rescue needs to come in to kind of help us save our economy, because nobody will lend us any money anymore.
We're much worse off now than we were. I mean, the level of indebtedness is about 4 times as great as it was in the 1976 crisis. So even if the International Monetary Fund came in and imposed all kinds of things upon us, we'd still be much, much worse off than we were then. We learned no lessons from the experience. On the contrary, we decided to do it again on a bigger scale. And here we are. And the idea that these things can happen endlessly without consequence, that the borders can be open without consequence, that mass immigration can continue without consequence, it's not true. There will be consequences, and we will shortly be facing them.
Yeah, definitely, no question. And meanwhile, back to the future, we get another junior doctors' strike, because you could have predicted this, couldn't you, last year when Wes Streeting gave them 22%. Now they're coming back for 29%.
It's true. I don't understand why the basic issue here, which is that doctors should never strike, isn't made more of, either by politicians or by the NHS. Yeah. The idea that you can go into the profession of mercy and withdraw your willingness to supply mercy simply in pursuit of money is just so repulsive that I'm amazed that people can get away with making such threats. If you want to strike, don't become a doctor.
Yeah.
If you want to become a doctor, don't go on strike. These are very simple rules, which I thought everybody knew 20 years ago. Now they seem to have forgotten. It's another of the things that are going on. There is no commonly accepted morality in our country. You can do what you like, go where you want to go, do what you want to do with whoever you want to do it with, as the old song went, and none of it matters. It's plainly morally wrong for doctors to go on strike. They just shouldn't do it. Whatever the cause may be, it's just something they shouldn't consider. And why do we live in a society where people don't realise it?
Yeah, I know. But, I mean, it was for us, wasn't it? Every Labour government gets in, and every single time it happens, the unions, even if you thought they weren't as strong as they are, end up winning and end up getting what they want and end up bringing the government down, which I imagine will be the way it goes here.
Again, but you say that, but you could say the same of many Conservative governments as well. And the Heath era was a period when governments pretended to get tough, but in the end had to give in. But these are wholly different circumstances from then. Honestly, this really isn't the same. We don't have huge industrially based unions which go out on lengthy strikes, which threaten an otherwise productive economy. We don't have an otherwise productive economy apart from anything else. It's not the same thing. And then governments give into it because it's easier to give in than it is not to give in. But the real question, in my mind, is not to go over. People are entitled in a free country, for the most part, to withdraw their labour if they want more money or better conditions. It's not actually a particularly effective weapon. It's a very blunt instrument. They're entitled to it unless they work in a profession or trade where people's health and safety and lives depend upon them, in which case they can't do it. And that's absolutely that. It seems to me to be so clear in moral law that it doesn't even need to be discussed. And yet here we have doctors, for goodness sake, who are supposed to be in existence to save us from pain and danger and death, saying, oh, well, because we want more money, we're not going to do that. Well, how can we respect doctors if their attitude towards the exalted profession to which they belong is so mercenary?
Yeah.
I can't.
And for which they volunteered to work. You know, it's not as if somebody press-ganged them into it and made them become doctors.
Went around with a huge fishing net and scooped them off the street and said, you've got to be a doctor now.
I thought of you when I saw this piece of breaking news today, because it may be another nail in the coffin of the postal service in this country. The Royal Mail apparently will be allowed to scrap Saturday deliveries for second-class post and switch to an alternate weekday service instead. I'm not sure what that means. I presume it means they're not going to deliver post on a Saturday anymore.
Well, that means the slow death of the second-class post. But long ago, the stripping away from the post office of its monopoly on profitable activities meant that this was going to happen. And it was all part of the privatisation frenzy, which I'm afraid most of us foolishly applauded at the time without realising the implication. This is what happens. I'm reading at the moment a very interesting biography of that fascinating politician, Ernest Marples, the man who wrecked the railways.
Yeah.
When he was running the post office as Postmaster General, when it was a government department, it was highly profitable. It was one of the most profitable places in the country, a very secure point of employment, provided bank accounts for most people who couldn't otherwise afford them, and delivered huge amounts of letters on time. But that was because it could cross-subsidise itself. Everything, all the parcels and all the express mail that had to be carried, all had to go through the post office monopoly. So it could afford the largely loss-making and inconvenient services, which it's now left with and can't afford because all the profitable bits have been stripped away. The only way it can make money now is by becoming less and less of a service to the public.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Inevitable consequence of what was done. It happened all over Europe. And I think elsewhere as well. The really profitable monopoly parts were stripped away from national post offices, and now they struggle against all the other delivery firms. And what do you expect? It's amazing that we still have a postal service at all, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, it's quite remarkable that we've got anything left in this country, the way it's all been sort of denuded.
Well, actually, most of the times you go and look for it, it's gone. There used to be a post office down the road. You go to it, it's not there anymore.
Yeah, I know. It is absolutely ridiculous.
There's all kinds of other public services, and I live in a part of the country where there's still a reasonable level of public service, but in a lot of places you just can't find things like doctors and dentists, and post offices are far and few between. Railway stations, bus services, you name it. It's all being withdrawn.
Yeah.
Because we can't, as a country, afford it anymore because we spend so much money paying interest on our colossal debt.
I know, it's not great, is it? Peter, thank you very much indeed.
No, it isn't great. And could I just bung in something else, because I have an article in Daily Mail about the latest attempt to strangle the jury system on the basis it'll make the courts more efficient. And this is such bilge. Courts are inefficient because the government's been closing courts down. And add to that, of course, the huge backlog they built up during the COVID panic. It's not because the juries spend too much time deciding whether people are guilty or innocent. It's because it's a very inefficiently run service, which has been deliberately run down by the government over many years. And now they try and blame juries, which are the only feature in it which protects us from what is basically arbitrary power. If you don't have a jury in a court system, then basically a trial is just a room full of people deciding how long to send you to prison for.
Yeah.
And the juries are weak enough as it is, and I really do think there should be more outrage against these latest. And I can't tell you how many of these reports there have been over the past 40 or 50 years saying, "Oh, juries are a nuisance; they should be cut back." Why is the jury such a target of Whitehall reports and of politicians?
Because they can't control it.
Read my article in the Daily Mail today and you'll see why.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much indeed. We'll get that out. Peter Hitchens, columnist of the Mail on Sunday. We had the breaking news just before we started talking to him that a man has died after being stabbed to death outside a casino in Knightsbridge. Police have set up a crime scene outside of the Park Tower Luxury Hotel and Casino. No arrests have been made at this stage. Investigations are supposedly ongoing. A couple of more tweets and texts for you. Sean from Bridlington says, Mike, we don't have a single NHS dentist where we live. What do the authorities do with illegal migrants in that situation? Pay for them to go private or taxi them 30 miles each way to Hull and back? Well, I think we know the answer to that one. And Sarah says, why doesn't somebody cut out the labels on Greg Wallace's clothes? That's what most normal people do. He doesn't like labels, apparently. It's very sensitive, particularly in his nether regions. I don't know why. 21 minutes past 8.
No, and for the 2,000 whatever that we are supposedly going to send back, are they not just going to fill those spaces, as it were, with another 2,000? I mean, I really, really do not know what geniuses in Number 10 and the Foreign Office and the Cabinet Office have come up with this absolutely ludicrous scheme. Politically, it is a complete non-starter. How are they going to sell that to the voter?
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 24 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through. You know what to do. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We're here till 10 o'clock, of course, when Julie Hartley-Brewer comes along. Mark from Norfolk says, Mike, what a ludicrous NHS guest presenting a false narrative about hourly pay. I used to be in a job which paid me £65,000 a year, a good salary, yet I continuously worked 70 hours per week because that's what the job required. At no time did I whinge that I was only being paid £17 an hour. I was on a very good salary and I knew my job required me to work long hours. I accepted this and didn't go on strike to push that to £20 an hour. This is normal for many salaried employees and even more so for the self-employed. Junior doctors need a dose of reality medicine. And Stephen in Hillingdon says, Mike, it's funny, the junior doctor never mentioned the 24% pension contribution they also get. They also don't mention that in Australia it's only 12%. It would be interesting to see the difference in pay around the world when this is all taken into account. Well, I think there's no question that the junior doctors who are voting to strike and who are wanting to go out on strike are being very disingenuous about how much they get paid and how well they're actually doing. And as you could have seen if you watched the interview, the guest didn't want to be drawn yet either on whether, if the government doesn't have an awful lot of money, they would care if it was taken away from special needs children. She said, well, that's the government's job to figure out. Not exactly the sort of compassion you expect from the NHS, is it really? And talking of compassion, how about if you run a pub or go to a pub? Because according to figures out now from the British Beer and Pub Association, right, 378 sites will shut across England, Wales and Scotland before the end of the year, which basically means that pub numbers will get to their lowest level in a century. That's one pub closing every single day from now till the end of the year. Thanks to Rachel Reeves. Let's talk to Torrin McLaughlin, spokesperson for the British Beer and Pub Association. Torrin, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
Thanks for joining us. I mean, we all know already that the hospitality business has taken a massive hit since the national insurance hike. I think 69,000 jobs have gone in hospitality, from what I understand, since the April national insurance rise. This looks like it possibly another 6,000 jobs being lost by the end of the year. It's a disaster, isn't it?
It's really tough out there. It's really tough out there if you're running a pub. The budget last year, and alongside with EPR costs, we estimate that that's cost the sector about 850 million, and that's on top of being one of the highest taxed industries in the UK. I think we've spoken about this before, but £1 in every 3 that is spent in the pub goes straight to the taxman. 40% of brewery turnover goes straight to the taxman. And it's getting to the point where it's difficult to sort of quantify what is the straw that breaks the camel's back, but we need to see real action from the government and real support.
You don't get the sense that they care about pubs, though, do you?
Well, we were the only cut in the budget. We were the only cut in Labour's first budget. So I think that there has been nods to the sector. And while we're appreciative of that, and I think that's because of the huge social value, it's not helping with operating costs. Margins are so tight, and that's why we're seeing last orders being called for the last time across the country at increasing rates, because it's no longer becoming profitable to run a pub. There's only so much the customer will take when it comes to price increases. You and I know in London, the price of a pint sometimes breaks £10.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable. And so people will go and they'll go and drink at home, and these places, once they're lost, it's really, really difficult to bring them back.
I've noticed that as well, and of course the rates have gone up as well, which not everybody notices because we don't know. I mean, we will know if the price of a drink goes up, we'll know that national insurance has gone up, but not everybody understands the relationship between pub landlords and how much sort of business rates they pay.
Yeah, business rates is a massive one, and that's really the killer when it comes to the frontline margins of a publican. So business rates is obviously a non-domestic building tax. It's a local tax. There was a 75% relief. That's now in the budget was brought down to 40%. It's all from COVID. And the thing is, we don't want sticking plaster politics or policies. We want permanent and meaningful reform, and that's what Labour has said they'll do, and we're working with them closely to try and achieve that. But so far there's not been enough detail, and that doesn't give businesses the security that they need to operate.
And so what exactly would you like to see them do? Because Rachel Reeves knocked a penny off the pint, the cost of a pint in last autumn's budget, but I mean that's really just a drop in the ocean, isn't it?
There's a drop in the ocean combined with all of the other costs, especially. Like I said, it cost for the sector went up 850 million. So while that's a really symbolic and that's a symbolic change, and we're appreciative of that, it's not. Like I said, it's not enough. So we're calling for meaningful business rates reform for the tax nerds amongst your viewers. That's we're looking at 20p at least in the pound as the multiplier minimum, and that's just to break even. But we're also calling for beer duty to be cut. We've obviously got the Eurozone at the moment, and beer duty in the UK is 3 times higher than the European average, but it's 10 times higher than Spain and Germany. And that's a policy decision. It doesn't need to be that high. That's a government decision. If they brought that down, we'd see more pubs stay open, we'd see more pints being drunk, and we'd see less loneliness across the society.
Yeah, I mean, is it possible to give them a little graph and show them how that would work? Because I'm not sure they understand economics at all. You know, every time you get them to explain something, every policy they seemingly actually come up with doesn't really help, and if anything, it just hinders business.
Well, maybe we need to get you into number 10, Mike.
Well, I mean, I don't think they can afford me, to be honest, but, you know, I mean, it's not a place of common sense to me. And it's, like I say, priority-wise, they just don't seem to care about hospitality at all.
Yeah, and hospitality it's as we know, it's sort of the litmus test for the rest of industry. It's where people go and spend their money when they have that little bit extra. So whether it's, you know, £10 at the end of the week, you want to go and get a fish and chips and a pint at the pub. It's where people go when they do have that disposable income. And part of these closures that we're seeing is it's not just the cost of doing business, but it's like a real shocking indictment for the cost of living for people in the country.
It really is, absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Tara McLaughlin there from the British Pier and Pub Association. 1 pub a day likely to close between now and the end of the year, thanks to Rachel Thieves and her ridiculous policies on business rates, on national insurance going up, on the thresholds for national insurance actually coming down so that more people are caught up in it as well. And plus, just the price of a pint going up and up and up. Absolutely extraordinary. I wonder, have we got a clip of somebody being kicked out of a pub?
Man is not allowed in my pub. No, Laura. I'm not going to physically hurt him. That man... Oi! That's assault. I am not bothering you. I am not bothering him. That man is not allowed in my pub. Get out of my pub. Go on. Calm yourself down. Get out of my pub. Calm down. Thank you.
There's nothing like it, is there? The memories of that was, of course, campaigning around the time of the election. Keir Starmer there wearing a mask, getting chucked out of a pub. Get out of my pub! Speaking of entertainment, down at Wimbledon, of course, we're nearing the end of Wimbledon fortnight, and it was a big day yesterday. Lots and lots of famous people turned up, and according to the Daily Mail, it's now the new kind of red carpet. Hugh Grant was one of the people in attendance. He unfortunately didn't seem to find it quite as exciting as some of the other people in front of him who were doing that thing that you do at tennis, you know, where you move your head from side to side watching the ball going. When I was there, you had to move your head really quickly because we were so close to the action that it was literally happening right before our very eyes, just feet away from us. But still, you might remember the controversy of last week with me and Rupert Bell arguing about progress and the removal of the line judges. They're still arguing about it, right? There was a piece in the Times today by Stuart Fraser, the tennis correspondent, saying, you know, the problem now is that people just miss the drama. Because quite often there are no line judges, you don't see somebody with their arm out, you know, going out, or, you know, going that way with out or going that way with in. And so as a result, during very high intense matches, sometimes you don't hear the automated voice when it calls out. So you don't even know who's won the point until you have to look at the scoreboard. So he's saying the Wimbledon line calling system leaves spectators in the dark. Automated calls are often drowned out and human line judges are now gone. So confusion follows every close call at SW19. So I'm afraid progress it is not. And certainly Hugh Grant obviously misses the line judges because it's what used to keep him awake, for heaven's sake. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Well, I've got a simple reply to Basha Mukherjee, who was threatening to leave the country unless she gets more money, saying doctors are going to leave. Well, in my opinion, a doctor who is going to hold the country to ransom for money, saying that they're not going to treat patients or they're going to leave, that doctor is not worth keeping. You're out. Be gone. Good riddance, in my opinion.
Absolutely right. Actually, I've got a new video from Wimbledon that I might play you in a little while, which has just come into me from last weekend, funnily enough. That was, of course, Mark on doctors. Yeah, if you don't want to work here and you don't fancy it because it's costing you too much money, or you want to go to Australia, just go. I would let them go. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we're going to speak to Charles-Henri Gallois, because it's all part of the new Entente cordiale with the French. We're going to speak to more French people to find out what's going on and what they think of Macron's state visit. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:35. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Streeting will cave into the doctors and give them what they want, says Andy from Thatcham. Then the train drivers will be back cap in hand, and the nurses and the teachers, and so on and so on and so on. And, of course, that's exactly what will always happen under a Labour government. One from Darren, who says, great shows over, Mike. My latest spinal surgery appointment has been cancelled in November due to unforeseen circumstances. Now an appointment number 4 has been given to me. Absolutely right. This airport music, says Mike, does it have some subliminal message? Buy from the shops, perhaps? I don't know. It's a very good question. Welcome to Heathrow. This is your pilot speaking. Please go and buy some duty-free before you get on the plane. I don't know. Let's speak, though, now to Charles-Henri Gallois, President of Generation Frexit. Bonjour, Charles.
Hello, Mike.
How are you? Nice to see you. We haven't spoken for a while. Lots and lots of things to talk about. A lot of us asking a question here. Why does President Macron need a 3-day state visit? You know, he's still here. When's he leaving?
I think that because it's people, French people cannot stand it anymore. So as you can see now, he's doing a world tour and he's traveling all around the world. And he's doing only international politics. I have seen a poll this morning, a YouGov poll. He has a 17% approval rate among French people. So it shows that he won't go doing a Tour de France, but he would rather prefer to go to the UK or elsewhere. And, you know, now Macron, he has no, let's say, power at all regarding domestic policy. He has no majority. He's not able to pass each law. So he will do a world tour, and he will go saying what we need to do in Ukraine, what you need to do in Iran. He will do some comments, but at the end, he's more commenting what Donald Trump is deciding that doing real politics. And I think it will be quite the same for this UK tour, because he says, I want to take decision, I want to collaborate with you regarding immigration, but at the end, he has not the power to pass a law. So I think it's a waste of time for the UK. And I have seen actually that he didn't want to see Nigel Farage. I think it's quite a lack of vision, because all the polls show that Nigel could be the next prime minister in the UK. And actually, maybe it's better for Nigel, because it would have been a waste of time, because by 2029, thanks God, Macron won't be there anymore.
No, exactly right. No, I mean, he still clings on to the whole kind of idea of just hanging around with people who didn't want to leave the European Union. Keir Starmer, of course, was the one who wanted to have a second referendum when he was leader of the opposition. And he, like Macron, is hated now by his own people. So the only thing he can do is entertain foreign dignitaries and go and try and get things like the coalition of the willing going on. But apparently last night in the Guildhall speech that he made, President Macron urged Britain to rejoin the European Union, and everybody cheered, you know, because that's the blob. Those are the people who didn't want us to ever leave.
I mean, Macron does not like democracy. Even if you remember, he had, I think it was an interview in the BBC, and he said if French people would have the same referendum as British people, it would be very likely that French people would vote also to leave. But he doesn't want to do this referendum, so it shows what he thinks about democracy, and that's why maybe he wants a referendum to rejoin, even if the Brexit referendum is not that far away in time, and even if Reform UK is winning all the elections, that shows that there is no regret, that they like to say and the media like to say. I mean, the only real polls are elections, and if you look at elections, I don't think that British people want to rejoin. The reality is that some British people are quite disappointing the way Brexit has been done, but it's more a question of national policy and what you do after Brexit than Brexit itself. You can have bad politicians and bad politics when you're independent. It's two different things. But then if you're independent and if you have good politicians and good politics, you can really do the thing you want. And you can see it about immigration. I mean, the UK has all the lever to deal with immigration. There is this European Court of Human Rights, which is an issue as well. But otherwise, they have the power to change immigration. And I think, for example, if Nigel is elected, you will see the level of migration decreasing a lot and close to net zero. So it's more a question of the policy you want to do. And it's true that the Conservatives have been very disappointing, and Keir Starmer is quite a disaster. So that's why I think British people want one change, and you could see all the benefits of being an independent country when you have other leadership in the country.
Absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Charles-Henri Gaulois, thank you very much indeed, President of Generation Frexit. We're hearing news, by the way, that in the European Parliament there's a vote of no confidence coming in Ursula von der Leyen. That could be expected a little bit later on today. One here from somebody who doesn't give a name. How about playing the song in the airport, Hey, I'm going to Barbados? Well, I suppose only if you actually are going to Barbados. It's like if you were in Barbados and in the airport they played the song, Hey, we're going to Barbados. It doesn't make any sense. Mike, I'm a bit confused, says Davey. 1 minute, the doctor's saying they need more money to keep doctors. She said there are doctors not working. Can't they work it out? The same with teachers. If they get more money, the greedy gets, there's less money in the budget to employ more staff. I thought these people were meant to be clever. Well, this is the trouble. When you speak to people from these junior doctors' organisations like the BMA, basically the problem is that they're ideologically striking. They're not actually that interested in being medical doctors. They're far more interested in what they can get from government. They're far more interested in bringing governments down. Jamie from Leeds says, morning, Mike. With regards to the one-in, one-out deal, how long do you think it will be before the distant uncle, cousin, brother, mother, sister, auntie offer their paid services to vouch for distant relatives to come here? Another pathetic, poorly thought out lefty solution which will do absolutely nothing but be completely exploited. Exactly. How is it that nobody else can see that? Incredible. And Bob in Aberdeen says, I can't think of anything worse than voting for a strike which you will not take part in. I know, that sounded a bit odd, didn't it? Your spokesperson for junior doctors may well be a brilliant clinician, but it was hard not to notice an absence of focus on patients. The NHS is becoming increasingly self-centred, and that's very sad to witness, says Michael. Coming up, we've got much more to do, including Harry Cole, editor-at-large at The Sun. He's going to talk to us next.
you can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I
This
haven't
is
got
not one.
time. Don't tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people, then we can solve that problem like that.
You won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why? Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap? The court's time being wasted, laying down a ruling on what is a woman. You and I have been speaking for far too many years about
And
this.
actually, you know, I'm very grateful to you too, because you have always covered this topic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:45. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Steve in Cambridge on the NHS guest that we had. Basher had no answers for you. Vote to strike, but don't strike. Give them a big pay rise, I say, but take it out of their pension, not from taxpayers. This will stop future strikes, guaranteed. That's a good point, isn't it? The junior doctors should be called irregular doctors, says Martin from Lichfield. I trained to be a commercial airline pilot and had to sign a bond for 3 years after completion for my training, or I had to pay it back. These selfish, irresponsible young doctors should take a reality check. This should be mandatory. Their selfishness makes me fume. I think a lot of people would say the same thing. Big story this morning on the front page of The Sun. Harry Cole, with another exclusive. Former Tory chairman Sir Jake Berry became the biggest name yet to defect to reform last night. A big boost for Nigel Farage's party. And, of course, he's the former Tory party chairman. We'll be speaking to him a little bit later on in the show. Harry Cole is here with us right now, editor-at-large at The Sun. Harry, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well indeed. Big news last night. Absolutely a stonking result for Nigel Farage and reform. What can you tell us about how it all happened?
Well, I think this is what I mean. I don't think Sir Jake Berry is the only Tory politician. Having a look at what's happening, look at those polls, look at the way the world is going. Lost his seat last year, no thanks to, in a large part thanks to reform, splitting the vote in his what was used to be a Labour margin. Labour took it back after 14 years. There are a lot of Tory MPs and former MPs who would very much like to join reform, but. I think the interesting thing is, they're almost queuing up to jump over, and Nigel Farage is going to be able to be quite selective, I think, in who he takes to the calls. But I think a former Tory party chairman is kind of unheard of. This is a guy that literally ran the Tory party, albeit it was only for a short amount of time. But he was a long-standing cabinet minister. He was, a very close ally of Boris Johnson, and. He's. I don't like the word mainstream as such, but he was a sort of big fixture in the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
There's some fringe person, so I think it's a really interesting sort of bellwether of where the right in this country is. That actually. Someone who is served right at the heart of the Tory Party is willing to make that jump, and I think what would be really interesting to see is whether you start to see more sort of moderate, mainline, middle of the road Conservatives also realising where they're at. For reform, I think it's interesting. That I don't think they want to become, Tory 2.0, and I don't think they should do that either. In terms of, they want to be appealing to people all over the country, not least in the Labour's former northern industrial heartlands, where, Boris Johnson may have won them, Brexit may have won them over, but they went back to Labour in 2024. So he does need to have a sort of broader appeal than just being a sort of wash-up shop for former Tories, but. I suspect this one was just too irresistible, given Sir Jake Berry was the Tory party chairman.
Yeah, exactly right. And given his closeness to Boris Johnson, I don't know whether he still is. I mean, is this a gateway kind of scenario? Could it be that people see Jake Berry going in and going, well, actually, I've been thinking about it, but I wasn't really sure. But since he's gone, maybe I'll go as well.
Well, but perhaps I don't think this is. I don't think we're going to see Boris Johnson joining reform anytime soon.
I'm not sure Nigel Farage would want him, would he?
Well, the only man that's ever done a deal with Nigel Farage was Boris Johnson back in 2019 to get him to stand down. You know, they all deny there was any deal, but you know, we all know that thing didn't happen by mistake or by accident. So look, I think the Farage feels that Boris perhaps, certainly his administration slightly welched on their end of the deal, having stood down candidates in Tory-facing seats in 2019, allowed the Tories to get that big majority, to save Brexit, so to speak, and then, in Farage's view and whatever else was dangled to help get that deal over the line, that the terms of that were betrayed. So I think we're somewhere over that. But I think that your original point is correct, Mike, in the fact there is a, this isn't, as I said, this isn't some fringe Tory. This isn't someone who's been, this isn't some disgraced former politician who's now trying to reinvent themselves in a new party, having left their old party in, under a cloud. This is a straight up defection.
And it's more bad news for Keir Starmer as well, I suppose, because he seems to be increasingly irritable every time Nigel Farage gets up to say anything. The whole House of Commons yesterday for Prime Minister's questions was pretty badly behaved, weren't they, when Nigel Farage was speaking?
I just don't know who these Labour MPs and Tory MPs and Liberals and Independent. Who do they think they're helping by doing this? Yeah. One of those most famous images I always remember of Nigel Farage is when he used to stand up in the European Parliament and say, one day, if you keep behaving like this, Britain's going to leave the EU. And they all laughed and jeered, and and now you go back and look at those videos now, and you think, they're laughing on the other side of their faces now, aren't they?
Well, as he famously said at the time, didn't he? He said, "You're not laughing now." I mean, that became a kind of a meme, didn't it?
I just think, I just don't understand. I think if you are a regular puncher, I know, you see that footage, you're not as politically engaged as, so perhaps, me and you and others are. But you look at that and you just think, well, why are they doing that? Yeah. What are they so afraid of? They don't want him to get his voice out there. Have a look at the polls. And I have to say, I think the Speaker probably should start to intervene on that. I think
he needs to do more. He really does. He clearly doesn't want to.
We hear a lot of him. We hear a lot of him, when he wants to tell backbenchers to be quiet or ministers and the like. But he allows this sort of barracking and cacophony of noise only in very selective terms.
Absolutely. I'm hearing that there's a big meeting on Friday, an away day. It always puts the fear of death into anyone in corporate Britain, doesn't it? When you go, we're having an away day with the company. You go, oh God! But there's going to be an away day apparently somewhere in London. There's a secret location. Keir Starmer and his cabinet talk of a possible reshuffle. What are you hearing?
I was under the impression, and have been steered very heavily against the idea that it was going to be a reshuffle this side of the summer. I think that will more likely come in the autumn, not least because the position of the Chancellor isn't exactly crystal clear right now. I think Keir Starmer does these sort of away days from time to time. One of them he managed to get all 300 yards away from and had it in the Foreign Office, so not exactly an away day, but there was always
not very far away day.
Exactly. There's always some amusing tittle-tattle out of these things about who spectacularly misjudges the dress code, and he loves a dressing down as the start. So I suspect we'll see some his casualties. Look, I think these things happen a lot. Gordon Brown used to take the cabinet on these long sort of away show roads. Get on the train. They're going to have a cabinet in Newcastle or Glasgow and stuff. Right. I think it's clear that from those interviews that Keir Starmer's been giving in the last few weeks, that when he said he was distracted by being on summit, so he missed a bit of benefit. He was distracted by this and distracted by that. I do wonder whether he's in listening mode now. He got an absolute tonking on the nose last week by that big massive rebellion. So I wonder whether there's some steam to be some steam vented around the cabinet table.
Well, there's another massive rebellion on the way, because not only has he got the special educational needs children being represented by the backbenchers, but there's another letter's gone in now from 100 Labour MPs, piece on the front of the Guardian, talking about needing to reduce the cost of living for people.
Yeah, these groups and factions. It's taken them, a little while. They got off to a slow start the 2024 intake, but now they've got a taste of setting the agenda. now they've wrestled back the political control really from Downing Street, and you'll start to see this more and more. You'll start to see them flex their muscles. There'll be this group for that and this pressure group for that, and they start to split into factions, and that's never fun for the government, because you're always trying to please one faction. The ones you've got to look out for though are these mythical groups and letters and factions that remarkably pop up and are incredibly supportive of a particular strand of government policy. And so you wonder, you've got to know which ones are the actual rebels and which ones are the actual toadies.
Yes.
So isn't it remarkable there's a backbench group that says, we really want some growth, and every time there's anything that looks vaguely like growth, they're going, wow, look at all this growth that Rachel Reeves has got.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
It was nice to see her looking happy yesterday, at least. I mean, at least there were no more tears for Rachel.
I know. I mean, yeah. I think the poor woman's going to have that one round her ankle for a while. I don't think that's going to become one of the more defining images of the political era. I would say.
It's definitely going to be one for the end of the year roundup, isn't it? That's for sure. Great to see you. Harry Cole, thank you very much indeed. Big piece on the front this morning. The exclusive story that basically Jake Berry, the former Tory chairman, Sir Jake Berry no less, has joined Reform. We'll be speaking to him coming up in the next hour. Let's get a quick voice note from Becky.
Hi Mike, it's Becky here from sunny West Yorkshire. Enjoying the show as always. Keep up the great work, love it. Keep banging that drum. Mike, please. I just had to have a laugh when I saw Wes Streeting being interviewed earlier on, where he was quote-unquote disappointed that the BMA have decided to strike, even though there was a low turnout for the ballot. Perhaps he needs to have a word with Angela, because the Employment's Right Bill's going to make it a damn sight easier to do more and more and more of this. Happy days.
Yes, of course. A very good point, Becky. They haven't realised, have they, that if Angela Rayner's sort of changes go through, all of those difficult problems for employers will also become difficult problems for the government, because they employ an awful lot of people in the public sector who will be able to avail themselves of all manner of rights that they didn't have before they came in. Fascinating stuff. Let's have a look at what people are talking about on Sun Letters today. And it's all about Macron, wouldn't you know? Sacre bleu. Here's one from Phil in Broadstairs in Kent. It says, you can always rely on French President Emmanuel Macron to blame the nasty Brits for everything. He claims that we need to address the pull factors that attract illegal migration. But when will he admit that the channel crossings are an EU problem and not simply a British one? Good point. Granville in Lancashire says this: President Macron hates us for Brexit, yet we are bending over backwards for him. He has taken millions of pounds to stop the boats and done nothing. We have given in to the French over fishing too. We then let him lecture us while on his state visit and having dinner with King Charles. Why should we try to please him? He won't be president next time around. He will be out on his ear, as will Starmer. Well, as you heard from Charles-Henri Gaulois over in France, President Macron is at one of his lowest ebbs of all time when it comes to the actual business of being popular, and he's not even going to be around for very much longer. I still don't understand why we're giving him a 3-day state visit. What on earth have they got to talk about? Steve from Ipswich says, a lawyer yesterday and a doctor today showing that these people are educated beyond their intelligence. And Rob says in Broadway, due to Labour policy and employers' national insurance where I work, no one is getting a pay review this year. Why does this numpty doctor think they should be an exception? Well, particularly when they want our money, Rob. It's not as if they're getting paid by the people that employ them. Well, they are, but we're the people that employ them. And that's the problem. As we were saying earlier, it's not all fun and games down at Wimbledon, because Hugh Grant was down there yesterday along with a whole load of very, very glamorous people. So much so that on the front of the Daily Mail this morning they're saying why Wimbledon's Royal Box is the new A-list red carpet. Well, never mind about Hugh Grant. We here have obtained at Talk a video. See if you can check out. There's Hugh Grant having a little sleep. Wake up, Hugh. There's some tennis being played, matey. Here's the real way to watch it. As you can see, there's quite a big crowd there. That's Centre Court last Saturday. You might spot the person in the middle with a bottle of champagne. Yeah, that would be me. Watching Novak Djokovic play. I'm indebted to my good friend Greg Bennett, who was actually there, former picture editor of the Daily Mirror, who spied me in the crowd and sent a video out on Facebook of me. Thank you very much indeed. There I was enjoying the very nice hospitality. A very good place. It turns out I'm going back They thought they'd banned me because I was too noisy, but it turns out I'm going back this Saturday as well. Who knew? Absolutely extraordinary times. Richard Tice says that government should be run like a business, says Tony from near John O'Groats. Companies hold annual general meetings each year where the shareholders can sack an underperforming board of directors. I'll buy that, Richard. I think we all would. Don't you think we all would buy that? And one from Howard in Suffolk. Seems to me the majority of the public hate silence. This is to do with the noise at the airport. There are background sounds almost everywhere you go. I'm convinced people get nervous when it's quiet and need to fill the void with random noise. Perhaps if it's silent, their minds start to think and it scares them. Well, it's true, isn't it? Everybody you see these days is walking around with headphones on. They've either got earbuds in. You know, you get into a shop, they're playing music. You walk into a pub, they're playing music. You know, what's wrong with just being a bit silent for a while? I think it could do us the world of good. It could be the answer to a lot of people's anxiety. People say, particularly with children, they're so overstimulated. They're always listening to music or listening to something. They've always got something stuck in their ears. They've always got some noise that they have to listen to or an iPad to play with. How about a little bit of silence? I mean, I know that's not a great advert for what I do, because obviously I make a lot of noise and I expect you to listen to it. So apart from listening to me, don't listen to anything else, especially not at Heathrow. This is Talk. We'll be back after the news.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say.
If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour.
Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 3 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham, here for another hour. We've been here since 6 o'clock. If you've missed any of it, then I'm terribly sorry for you because it's been a great show. We've got loads and loads of you still to talk to. Lots still happening in this hour. We're going to be speaking to Sir Jake Berry, a former Tory chairman who, of course, has defected from the Tory party. He's now joined Reform. Nobody's quite sure what exactly he's going to be doing. We're going to be talking to him to find out what his role could be and whether he is a gateway for an awful lot of other Tories who wish to defect from the Tory party, possibly even now MPs who are in the House of Commons. This is, of course, what he had to say about all of the Tory bad years.
If you literally want to design a system to destroy a country, you would struggle to do better. And I know who broke it, because I was there. And that's why I've decided to join the Reform Party.
It's quite an interesting job application form, isn't it? Listen, use me, employ me, because the last time I had a go at it, I made a real mess of it. Listen, I know that's not quite what he said, but listen, Jake Berry will be here, and we've got plenty to talk about. Meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron still in Britain on part 3 of his 3-day mission and his state visit. He's going to be visiting Downing Street shortly. What else have they got to talk about? Yesterday, we had a great surprise. We actually saw Mrs. Keir Starmer. She came out and stood on the steps of Downing Street alongside her husband, Emmanuel Macron, and Mrs. Macron, who managed to keep her hands off her husband for the moment. So far, we don't think she's given him a slap or a push or anything like that since they've been here. But what they have done is a deal. It's not 1 in, 1 out. It's 17 in, 1 out, which is pretty pathetic, really. France will take back basically 50 dinghy migrants a week under this new returns deal, which means over the course of a year, it will number something like 2,600. Unfortunately, there's about 45,000 that have come since this time last year. And in fact, as somebody pointed out to me today, there's about 70 of them coming this way on one boat at the moment. There's probably several boats out there. Nigel Farage is out in the channel. Keep an eye on it. We'll keep an eye on him and we'll bring you what he has to say all the way through the show. Also, of course, we've been talking very much about the situation, not just with migrants, but with junior doctors. They're going on strike. We spoke to one in the last hour. We couldn't really make much of a case as to why they need another 29%. And people in this country are sick to death of all of it. In addition to all of that, you've got people who are not working in this country and they're getting more money for not working than they would if they actually got a job. Extraordinary stuff. People are fed up with it. Let's get a voice note from Paul.
Morning, Mike. Paul in Burnley. Talking about the French, I'm rather jealous of the French because they seem to have a really successful Rwanda-style scheme. Unfortunately, the third-party country that they use is England.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of people have pointed that out. They do. They have a sort of exit strategy, don't they, for these migrants? They keep coming in their thousands every single year. They just send them all to Britain. Fantastic. 0344 499 1000. Helen Whately coming up as well. Shadow Department for Work and Pensions Secretary. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. By the way, amongst the many other things that we do here at Talk, the home of common sense, if you've got a story that's affected you or your family and you think we should know about it or investigate it further, please do email us at tips@talk.tv. Sorry, that's tips@talk.tv, and we'll look into what it is that you've got for us, and it may make a story onto the air. Particularly interesting, that. Gus in Aberdeen says, Mike, these junior doctors are just yet another example of the utterly self-entitled public sector expecting to be just given money despite delivering a terrible service in the main. If these doctors want 20% pay rises, then they can move on to the same pension schemes as the rest of us to pay for it. Otherwise, wind your necks in and start giving us a decent service. People are fed up with it. You know, they don't like to see greed. They don't like to see unfairness. They don't like to see people being rewarded for doing a bad job. And what they also don't like to see is people coming to this country and being given everything for free. As you're watching there, we see all sorts of badness going on. Asylum seeker hotels being set up, people being shipped from one port to another. Absolutely incredible stuff. And this morning, one of the big stories coming out of a think tank is that basically work does not pay. According to the Centre for Social Justice, they found that a universal credit claimant who is not working and takes the average housing benefit in addition will actually make in excess of £25,000 a year in 2026-27, and that would mean more than somebody who was a full-time worker on the national living wage of £12.21 an hour, who would earn about £22,500 after paying income tax and national insurance. And of course, they probably wouldn't get housing benefit either. So it's a real problem, because if you can't encourage people to go back into work, when are they going to do it? Helen Whately's here. She's Shadow Department for Work and Pensions Secretary. Helen, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's a pretty sorry, sad state of affairs, isn't it, where benefit claimants can actually make more money than people going to work. It's not much of an incentive for them to get off the benefits.
Yeah, we need to have a system where work pays and where it makes sense for people to work rather than be on benefits. But it's something we did when we were in government during the period from 2010 through to the pandemic is we did big reforms about making work really pay, and we brought down the level of unemployment, halved it from 8% to 4%. But something that we then saw since the pandemic is an increase of people claiming sickness benefits, and that is something that needs to be got under control. Even the government have said that they need to control the growth in the welfare bill, which is on its way up to 100 billion by the end of this decade. But if you've been watching Parliament over the last couple of weeks, which I know you have, you'll have seen that Labour tried to make savings, but then a series of U-turns conceding to their backbench MPs resulted, instead of their legislation on welfare making savings, it actually is going to end up costing more, putting the welfare bill up. And that's why today Kemi Badenoch's going to be making a speech talking about how we need to make savings from the welfare budget.
Yeah, because it seems now, because of the sort of the cock-up, if you like, that there was last week in Parliament, where it got so watered down the bill really wasn't worth the paper it was written on, they've kind of made it impossible now to have the conversation, because Labour backbenchers seem to say that almost everyone who's on benefits deserves to be on those benefits and they shouldn't have them taken away.
So it is going to be hard to make savings and benefits, and I wouldn't shy away from that. Of course, we do want to have a system that those who are seriously disabled deserve help. That's what most people think. The problem with our system at the moment is there are people who could be working but who instead aren't and are on benefits. Now, as you said, Labour messed up over the last few weeks, and what was meant to be some savings, not enough in the first place, ended up being spending more money. It's clear that Keir Starmer's backbenchers won't let him make savings, and that's heading the country towards a very difficult financial position. In fact, the OBR, which is like the government's independent financial advisor, literally said this week that the UK public finances are very vulnerable. It's very serious because of this failure to make welfare savings. Yeah. And it looks like Keir Starmer's going up putting up taxes in the autumn, which is the last thing the country needs, because what you get is essentially a doom loop of taxes going up, unemployment going up, taxes going up again to cover the extra costs of welfare for unemployment, and that doom loop then of the opposite of what we need, when what we need is savings to be made and the country to live within its means. And we, the Conservatives, are the only party making that case. So Labour voted for more welfare spending, Reform is calling and indeed voting for more welfare spending. We're the ones who are standing apart saying, no, we've got to get this under control and live within our means.
But you said you didn't want to be too specific, or you didn't want to shy away from exactly how you would make those welfare savings, because clearly something's got to give. You know, you've either got to take a view that people are claiming too much sickness benefit, or you're going to have to say that they're all entitled to it. So at some point or other, presumably, you have to put the bar somewhere and deny it to some people.
Actually, so I won't shy away at all from saying how, and so that's something that Kemi Badenoch is going to set out later today in a speech that she's making on welfare. We're going to talk exactly about how, starting with who should be receiving benefits. We're in a situation where around 1 in 4 people in this country are declaring themselves as disabled. Now, if that means 1 in 4 people saying that they believe they should be having benefits and not working, we clearly can't afford that as a country. So we need to focus on who should get benefits. And one of the things we're saying is people who we don't think should be on out-of-work benefits are people who are claiming because they have a common mental health or well-being problem, like anxiety as an example, or ADHD. Another area we're saying is actually we don't think foreign nationals should be able to come over here and claim sickness benefits straight away. So that's another area which Kemi will set out, which needs to be brought under control. We also know that we need to go back to having face-to-face assessments. A lot of the assessments have moved to being telephone. That's not a good way of assessing people's needs. So actually we are being quite specific about how these savings could and should be made.
Yeah. And in terms of actual sort of the way forward for people who are just on what you might call universal credit, you know, as the examples being put out there today on the front pages by the Telegraph and the Mail, you know, how would you counter that? You know, because there are people on minimum wage who might be thinking to themselves, well, why am I bothering to work?
Yeah, and it is really important to make sure that being in work pays better than being on benefits, including universal credit. I mean, that was the way the system was designed, and it was actually a big reform to introduce that. Another thing is to make sure that people's wages are going up in work, and that's something that we would like to see the government and Department of Work and Pensions doing more on. Is people not only earning the minimum wage but making progress in their careers. It's something that I worked on when I was Social Care Minister, for care workers to be able to advance up a kind of a career ladder and do more and earn more during the course of their lifetime in work. So that's a really important part of fixing the problem.
Yeah, Hannah Whately, thank you very much indeed. Shadow Department for Work and Pension Secretary, saying Kemi Badenoch later on today is going to be announcing what she would do to bring the welfare bill down. You have to say the Conservative Party probably quite well responsible during COVID, certainly, for putting the welfare bill up, because that's when it seems to have absolutely ballooned. But of course, I think we found out, did we not, that thousands more people are claiming disability benefits now on welfare than they were even just this time last year, because an awful lot of the claims have doubled and tripled and quadrupled ever since Labour have been in. Let's talk to David Maddox, political editor at The Independent. David, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Not bad at all. Nice to see you. This government seems to be kind of boxing itself in at almost every single level. You know, they've got a problem with the welfare bill. They can't seem to reduce it. They've got a problem with the NHS. The doctors are now demanding more money. They've got a problem with immigration. They've just done a deal for 17 in and 1 out. Is there anything... I mean, but you listen to Keir Starmer in the Commons and you think that everything was going swimmingly.
Well, yes. I mean, obviously, he would like us all to think everything's going swimmingly. I mean, the problem he's got, I'm afraid to say, is that he's largely lost control of his domestic agenda.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, he's terribly reliant on getting foreign deals for looking good at the moment, which is why they're desperately trying to finalise this pilot scheme, I believe they're calling it, for this alleged 1 in, 1 out.
Yeah.
Now, there was a bit of confusion about it last night, frankly, but it was. It looks like it's a very small, limited scheme, but I suppose an incremental step into trying to resolve the problem.
Well, you do wonder when you say incremental step. I mean, it's very, very incremental, like tiny, almost infinitesimal. I mean, talking about sending 50 back in every single week of the year, which only mounts up to 2,600 over the course of that year. We're being told there's already a boat on its way here today with 70 people in it. Yeah. So that's one boat. And they're only going to 50 of those people are going to get sent back. Everybody else that comes this week is going to stay.
Yes, and of course Rishi Sunak was trying to get a similar sort of deal as well over the line. And the problem is, of course, that the EU and the French didn't want to agree. And a lot of the reason for that, I'm afraid to say, is because of bad feelings about Brexit and the fact that we could have sent them back had we stayed in the EU, of course. But here we are.
Well, you say that, but I mean, the EU is not exactly in florid form on this one. Greece has just closed its borders to everybody coming in illegally from North Africa, and Greece and Italy and Spain and a couple of other European countries said we don't actually want this 1 in, 1 out deal because we don't want anybody being sent back to us. And so the European Union have got the same problem we've got, and they don't really want to have to complicate it because they don't know where to send them either.
They've got an even bigger problem than us in some of these countries. Yeah. And it's, I mean, this is a reason that Marine Le Pen's doing so well in France. It's a reason that Meloni got elected in Italy.
Yeah.
It's a reason that Viktor Orban continues to get elected in Hungary because he has the hardest line of all on all these issues. It's a huge problem across Europe. So, yeah, they definitely don't want the ones coming to us sent to them on top.
No, they don't. So, I mean, it's not really much of a deal, is it? You know, this 3-day sort of extravaganza jamboree summit meeting, which nobody really quite understands. I still don't really know why we gave Macron a state visit. And a lot of people are very critical of that big long table you can see there as the kind of, the kind of epitome of, let them eat cake while people are sort of scrounging around to make enough money to pay their tax bill. You know, here we are spending £500,000 on some dinner and fizz.
Well, yes, I mean, but I would say in defence of this is that, as I say, it's an incremental step. It kind of breaks the barrier on actually doing this thing and hopefully can lead to something much bigger in the future in terms of returns. And in the end, this is the only way to break that model to stop these small boat crossings is that if people think they're going to return to France, they won't do it.
Well, yeah, but they'll I mean, if they only think only one of them is going to be returned to France and another 17 are going to get away with it, they'll still come, won't they?
No, I wouldn't disagree with that. It's certainly got to be a much bigger scheme in the end.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, you've got to send them. In the end,
sometimes you have to do these things in steps.
Yeah, but in the end, you've got to send them all back. I mean, we still haven't even captured the rest of the numbers who are here. We don't really know what that number is. It's very clear that there's an awful lot more people coming into the country than anybody knows. I mean, I had a call, as I say, just the other day from a long-distance lorry driver up in Cambridge. He parked up his car, parked up his lorry, and 4 illegal migrants jumped out the back of the lorry in front of him and just ran into the sort of countryside. And we don't even know how much of that is going on.
No, we don't. I mean, the whole thing is out of control, and it has been for quite some time. I mean, it's one of the main reasons that the last government collapsed in the end.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we need to look at Rwanda-type schemes again and all that.
Well, exactly right. And Starmer's finding that as well. Very good to talk to you, David. Thanks very much indeed. We've got lots more to do. David Mallock's there, at The Independent. Toby Young's going to join us in a minute to talk to us about the Islamophobia law, which the government is trying to bring in. He's, of course, the all-party parliamentary group chair on free speech, and he's founder also of the Free Speech Union. Let's get a voice note from Darren on pubs.
From a very sunny Warsaw. Yeah, pubs are closing down because Labour hate pubs. They wouldn't care if every pub in the country shut. You know why? Because your pub is your people's parliament. If I'm finished working time tomorrow, which I am, I'll pop into my local Spoons in Warsaw, which will be full of working people, and I mean working people. And the conversations will go along the lines of how crap this Labour government is. So, of course, Labour, 2-tier freer, I'd rather have us just sitting at home, getting all our information off the BBC. That's what they want. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, absolutely right, Darren. Thanks very much indeed. Yeah, they don't fancy you going near a Spoons in Walsall. That's absolutely not the kind of thing they would expect. And can you imagine, well, when we saw that footage before of Keir Starmer getting chucked out, get out of my pub. You know, he didn't even look like a man who should be in a pub. He was wearing a mask for a start, which is totally and utterly ridiculous. Jill says this: I thought Prince Andrew's claims he couldn't sweat was never going to be beaten until Greg Wallace's inability to wear underwear is blamed upon autism. Outrageous and deeply offensive to autistic people. Well, this is the trouble, you know. You've got to be careful when you do things like this. Greg Wallace is making out that, you know, he's the victim here when he spent an awful lot of his career, it would seem, at the very least, you know, touching women up and supposedly making them feel uncomfortable. And also, everybody says, running around naked, just wearing a sock, not on his feet. It's 9:20.
Well, I found the whole spectacle, frankly, obscene. I'm actually less exercised by the cost of the banquet than the fact that we wheeled out our finest royals and traditions to welcome this guy who has done nothing other than stitch us up for a period of many years. We have stuffed Macron's mouth with gold, and in return, he has basically made fools of us.
Across across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:23. I'm Mike Graham. Morning, Mike, says Victoria from Kent. My children brought me ear pods as they got sick of you, as your voice boomed out of my phone from 6 a.m. So I'm one of the annoying people with ear pods, so I can listen to Talk and not hear the kids. Keep up the good work. Yeah, well done, Victoria. I'm not being critical of people wearing ear pods or wearing headphones. I'm saying that, you know, we do live in a world now where people walk around with these things on their heads all the time. I'm very grateful if you're listening to Talk, and long may it continue. But the point is that, you know, this ambient music at Heathrow to make it sound like it's an airport when you're already in a bleeding airport just seems like a mad, ridiculous thing for me to have to put up with. You know, I can already hear the sounds of an airport because I am in an airport. But anyway, let's talk about Islamophobia instead. Lord Toby Young's here, Tory peer, Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Free Speech and, of course, founder of the Free Speech Union. Toby, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So, we're going to talk initially about this media monitoring group, right? Muslim Media Watchdog, which is supposedly called the Centre for Media Monitoring, the CMM, pretending that it's not part of the Muslim Council of Great Britain. But I also wanted to talk more broadly to you about the passing through Parliament of this Islamophobia bill, because that's still going on, despite what we think, isn't it?
Well, it's not a bill, Mike. They're very keen to make the point that it's a non-statutory definition of Islamophobia, but so it's not. I mean, I wish it was a bill. So Angela Rayner has convened a working group to come up with an official definition of Islamophobia, which they're then going to convey to ministers in secret. They're not going to publish their definition. And then when ministers are happy, when Angela Rayner's happy, that definition will then be rolled out across the public sector, Whitehall, the police force, universities, and various efforts will be made to prescribe it. But it's being done in a non-statutory way. So there's no opportunity for the House of Commons or the House of Lords to scrutinise it. There's no opportunity to repeal it in the next Parliament. It's all being done under the radar. And there was a sort of minor scandal a couple of weeks ago when it emerged that the working group, in spite of having said that they would consult widely with various different stakeholder groups about this definition before arriving at it, it turned out they were actually inviting a hand-picked group of activists to submit to the consultation. And they didn't ask the Free Speech Union, they didn't ask Christian Concern, they didn't ask Policy Exchange. I mean, numerous groups who are very interested in this particular topic, and particularly its impact on freedom of speech, weren't consulted. Anyway, so the Free Speech Union wrote a threatening legal letter to Angela Rayner last week, pointing out that this consultation was a breach of public law principles when it comes to who you're supposed to consult. You are supposed to consult broadly and widely, particularly if you say you're going to do that. And in addition, this business of wanting to convey their advice to ministers in secret and not publish their findings, not publish the evidence they've accumulated in the course of arriving at this definition, we said that too was a breach of public law, one of the Nolan principles, the principle of transparency. Anyway, a couple of days ago, the working group announced that actually they were now going to carry out a proper consultation. They were going to extend the deadline. So at least we've won a minor victory there.
Yes, and that's very good to hear. But, I mean, so I suppose in effect what they're trying to do here is create a law which isn't really a law then, but which will be acted upon by officers of the law, like the police.
Yes, I mean, it's a grey area. And it happened under the last government too, but I think it's really sinister. If you want to prescribe particular forms of speech, which is what this is all about, then that really should be done via legislation, with both houses of Parliament given an opportunity to scrutinise it properly. To try and do it under the radar, behind closed doors in this way, with no opportunity for accountability, just seems completely wrong. The Dominic Grieve former Conservative Attorney General, who is the chair of the working group, his argument is, well, you don't have to worry about the impact this is going to have on free speech because it's non-statutory. No one's going to be prosecuted for being Islamophobic according to this definition. But we know from the way in which the all-party parliamentary group on British Muslims' definition of Islamophobia, that group came up with a definition. Again, it wasn't subject to parliamentary scrutiny, and that was taken up. It was taken up by the Labour Party, it was taken up by the Lib Dems, it was taken up by the Greens, various local authorities took it up. And part of that definition, we don't know yet whether this will be in the new definition, I hope not, but part of the APPG on British Muslims' definition of Islamophobia included, as an example of Islamophobia, drawing attention to the overrepresentation of Muslim men of Pakistani heritage in grooming gangs. Yeah. And all these local authorities in places like Rotherham, where the grooming gangs were rife, embraced this definition. And I think that inhibited people from blowing the whistle, inhibited councillors and council employees. They were terrified of being accused of Islamophobic if they drew attention to the rape gangs. And it's not just this media monitoring unit which has been smearing people as Islamophobic if they've talked about the fact that in one case this media monitoring unit criticised the Associated Press for mentioning that the man who carried out the attack in the Manchester Arena was a Muslim and shouted Muslim slogans before he blew himself up. That was apparently Islamophobic. The Islamic Human Rights Commission, they named Baroness Casey as Islamophobe. They shortlisted her for the title Islamophobe of the Year. Various Labour MPs who blew the whistle were shortlisted for Islamophobe of the Year, like Sarah Champion. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. But we know from the recent past that if you come up with a definition of Islamophobia, if local authorities, if Whitehall departments, if political parties take it up and embrace it, it inhibits people. They're terrified of criticising Islam, terrified of drawing attention to the overrepresentation of Muslims in grooming gangs, in terrorist attacks, for fear of being branded Islamophobic. It's absurd that one religion should enjoy this special protection. You know, what about Christophobia? What about Hindu phobia? What about Sikhophobia? Why should we single out one particular group for this special protection? It's two-tierism.
It really is two-tierism. I mean, interestingly, I was reading in the Telegraph today that Lord Hermer has apparently given himself extra powers and an effective veto over government policy, which might include this. And I wonder if there's a loophole here, because he claims now that lawyers should assume that every decision made by a minister will be subject to a legal challenge. So perhaps this one could also be subject to a legal challenge.
Yes, well, we laid the groundwork. The Free Speech Union laid the groundwork for a legal challenge in our letter to Angela Rayner last week. And it seems they are concerned about that, Mike, because they've now announced that they're going to make these various adjustments to the way they're going about coming up with this definition, so it's less challengeable. But nevertheless, it may well be challengeable. I would have thought that, I mean, who knows, but I would have thought that Lord Hermer is more likely to claim that legislation he doesn't like is vulnerable to legal challenge than legislation he likes.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunately very, very true. Good to talk to you. Lord Toby Young there, thank you very much indeed. Founder of the Free Speech Union, fighting a good fight for everybody in this country on the definition of Islamophobia, which they're trying to rush through and push through under the radar in the House of Commons, get it into some kind of law, even though it's not an actual statute, so that people can be in some way pulled up for being Islamophobic. Nobody seems to know what that will actually mean. Let's get a voice note from Jamie.
1 for 1 turns out to be 1 for 17. 4 years of fishing rights turns into 12. £5 billion a year saving turns into £100 million cost. I'm sure that bloke would pay full price for a DFS sofa. Honestly, where is this country going to be in 4 years' time, with deals being signed and pay rises being given left, right and centre that are costing the taxpayer way, way more than they ever needed to, and half of them don't need to be done, full stop.
Unbelievable. Absolutely ridiculous. Incredible. 0344 499 1000. One from Kim in Torbay. Why aren't Border Force interrogating the illegals to build up intelligence on smuggling gangs instead of just providing a taxi service? Yeah, absolutely right. Steve from Cheadle Hume says the musician Brian Eno created an ambient music album called Music for Airports in the 80s. Yeah, Stephen, you probably weren't listening when I told Simon Calder a little bit earlier. I've got that album. I've still got it. They're still playing ambient music for airports in the airport. Don't ask me why. Coming up next, we're going to be speaking to Sir Jake Berry, former Conservative chairman, now member of Reform. We'll ask him why. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 9:35. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here, of course, but she'll be here just before 10. Right now, we've got Sir Jake Berry. So, Jake, very good morning to you.
Thanks for having me on.
Very nice to see you. The newest member of the Reform Party, unless somebody's joined.
Well, I guess a few people might have joined overnight.
They might have done, but you're all over the sun today. Change comes by challenging the old order. The system's not working, so let's shake it up. This is quite a seismic win, I suppose, for Reform. You're former Tory party chairman. You were sat in 2 cabinets over the last 14 years. You were an MP until 2024. In a way, you are not an MP because Reform also ran in your seat. I mean, if it hadn't been for that, you might still be an MP. Was that part of your reasoning because of the way that Reform have got such influence now on the elections?
No, I mean, no, not really. So my sort of thinking is, it took me a long time to make the decision. I've been a supporter and member of the Conservative Party for a very long time, held very senior offices in that party. And as you know, like, politics is really tribal. It's hard to make the change. But I got to the point, particularly with a young family, where I found myself really, even though I'd left politics, I lost my seat back in just over a year ago now, where I was sort of talking to friends, I was talking to my family, and we were having long discussions about, you know, Britain is so broken, maybe we should think about leaving. And in fact, lots of my friends have left the country. We saw those extraordinary figures.
We all know people that are doing this.
16,500 people in the last year. And I've always cared deeply about Britain, the community. That's why I first ever stood for Parliament back in 2010. And I thought, no, I want to fight. I want to stay. This is my country. I love my country. And having been at the centre of power and resisted a lot of what the Conservative Party tried to do, I resisted the national insurance increase. I was actually with Rob Jenrico, I just heard on your show a moment ago, was part of the people who tried to force Rishi to toughen up the Rwanda plan. I sort of just knew, in my opinion, that the Conservative Party didn't have the answer. I tried to change it from the inside. The Labour Party, I mean, crikey, has been a disaster. I often jokingly say it took the Conservative Party 14 years to make such a mess of things. The Labour Party seems to have managed it in less than 14 months. I do think Britain has one last chance at the next election to try and change our society for the better, to rebuild a Britain we can believe in. And I'm really excited that Nigel Farage has come forward, and on the very outskirts, I can be part of that change to make our country.
I was going to ask you, did you have a role in mind? Does he have a role in mind for you? Is it just that you're going to be a sort of a spokesperson for Reform? You're going to be a cheerleader for them? What are you going to be?
No, it's really early days. We chatted about a couple of things, but look, my main thing is that I'm going to spend my time supporting the party. I just think that Nigel Farage, he's got the right value set, and ultimately we can argue about policies and things you might agree and disagree with. ultimately, it's why I back Boris.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, you back people who have vision and passion for your country, and I believe that Nigel Farage is the person who can take Britain back. And I think if we look how quickly things have gone terribly wrong under this Labour government, uncontrolled migration, sort of criminals let out after serving less than a third of their time in prison. I do think those of us who care passionately and deeply about this country, we've got one last big job in us, one last duty, and that's to get behind reform and try and improve Britain.
And you can feel the change, and you can feel, I mean, every day we talk to people, as you know, on this show, who call in with their stories and their experiences, and a lot of people now use the word, it's unfair to me. They say it's fairness that they're bothered about, because under Labour, I don't think anybody quite can believe how bad they are. I mean, we all thought they'd have policies that we might not agree with, but the incompetence, the sheer incompetence of what's happening, the dangerous streets that we've now got, you say in your little video that you can't walk down the street with a phone in your hand. It's absolutely true. I had mine nicked last September.
Yeah, so I mean,
everybody has had something happen to them.
Yeah.
In some part of Britain, and lots of parts of Britain look very different now.
Yeah, and particularly the crime issue is particularly big in big cities and built-up areas. But actually, once you get outside those cities, and you look at those left-behind communities, places like where I used to represent, Rosendale and Darwin, Blackpool, other parts of the south of England, Canvey Island, in the south of England.
Seaside towns in particular.
And there is no political party, unfortunately, that is speaking for and representing those people and has a path to changing and improving those lives. And, I do think that Britain has been through the old political system for 30 years. And by the way, the Conservative Party isn't just to blame. The Labour Party is, it should bear over half the blame for this. Has sort of been prepared to sit back and rely on major cities to drive our economy, leave communities behind. I was always against that, which is why I was so pleased to be involved in levelling up when that was a thing in the Conservative Party that we seem to have left behind and the Labour Party never even went to. I do think for all of those left behind communities, which is an awful phrase, but I think people know what that means. There needs to be another way. There needs to be a party that really wants them, their families, the people who live there to succeed.
I've got a voice note for you from Mark, who sent this in. Mark, let's have a listen.
If Richard Tice thinks that people like me, the electorate, are going to forgive a bunch of Tories simply because they're in the Reform Party wearing a different coloured rosette and a different coloured tie, then I think he could be in for a bit of a shock, to be honest. Because I don't think that a bunch of Tories who ruin the country transfer into another party with a different coloured rosette, that's not going to give us change. That's not going to give us the difficult decisions that we need to take.
I mean, there will be some Reform voters who feel like that. One of the criticisms, I suppose, that Nigel Farage gets a lot, and so does Richard Tice, is that, where are you going to find all these MPs? We've got polls saying that, Reform could win, 250 seats. Reform could win, 300 seats. You never really know what the number's going to be. But where are they all going to come from, I suppose?
Well, look, that's a big job ahead of the party. I mean, just to address your caller, I mean, completely valid concern that he would have. I think the extraordinary thing about Reform and the movement that Nigel Farage is building is it's attracting people from, frankly, across the political spectrum. You see Labour councillors come here, you see Conservatives, you see people who've never been involved in politics, like Zia Yusuf, with an amazing business career behind him. He is, I think, through speaking and delivering the change that the caller clearly wanted to see. So the change that I want to see, is it going to be delivered? Nigel Farage is appealing across the political divide to people of all politics and none. And I hope what he will bring together, and I hope I can be part of it, is that coalition of the willing, of people who will make the difficult decisions to improve Britain. It's a completely legitimate concern. I'm not running away from the question from your caller, but I think it's not just about Jake Berry. This is a very broad political movement with people from across the political divide and the business community now coming back over and supporting it, because it is Britain's last hope, I believe.
Just as you were speaking, Emmanuel Macron just walked up the street in Downing Street and got there a bit early, actually. The door was then opened and Keir Starmer came out and they had a big sort of man hug together. I mean, I've got to ask you about this state visit. I mean, you'll know that not many state visits get organised in this country.
Yeah.
Why are we giving a state visit to the leader of France, who's pretty soon going to be out of a job, who's about as unpopular in France as Keir Starmer is in Britain? I mean, I just don't understand why he's here.
Well, look, I mean, the first thing is, I mean, Emmanuel Macron is a much better politician than Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
I mean, he absolutely stitches up like a kipper. Pun absolutely intended on the fishing. He's strung us along about this, you know, 1 in, 1 out.
Right.
It's now 17 in, 1 out. I don't think that'll ever happen. Wasn't it extraordinary that the French police suddenly realised what I'd listened to your show, Mike. People have been phoning in the show and saying, you know, why don't they just slash the dinghies? You know, one occasion, day and a half before he comes. Oh, well, they guess how to do it. You know, they won't be doing it again, I bet. And, you know, in the last 5 years, he's had nearly £1 billion from the British taxpayer, allegedly to stop people coming to this country. Immigration is out of control. The Labour Party do not have a plan to deal with it. And for ordinary working people up and down this country who are dealing with the consequences of it, let's be honest, they're not living next door to Keir Starmer in Downing Street, are they? They're in white working class communities or working class communities, regardless of their sort of, regardless of whoever may make them up, you know, are feeling the difficulty of getting a doctor's appointment, the inability to get your kids into primary school. And then to see the red carpet, literally, just on the screen rolled out from there, sticks in the craw.
It does. It really does, particularly the sort of lavishness of it all. And it wasn't helped by King Charles saying, oh, we don't really have any borders anymore.
Well, he's right, though. I mean, he is right. I agree with most things the King says, and I agree with him on that. I don't think it's a good thing, though.
It's not a good thing. I didn't like the fact that he used the word irregular migrants either, because that's another thing that was started by the civil service. I think it was the Tory government who actually changed it and said, we're not going to call them irregular migrants anymore, you know, because that sits with a certain, what I regard as a kind of community, shall we say, of kind of socialists who don't want to call them illegal migrants.
Look,
well, exactly
isn't that what we're fighting against? This sort of, you know, we'll call it irregular migration, we've solved the problem. Look, if you're living in a, you know, a working class community anywhere in the UK, you know that hasn't fixed the problem, because the hotel where you used to go for your Sunday dinner with your kids, and they might have, I used to go to one in Darwin, it had a soft play. I used to take my kids to have our Sunday dinner there. That's closed, that's full of migrants. I can't take my family to eat there anymore. People who might have gone on holiday to the English or, you know, British seaside, all those hotels are full of migrants. You can change the title, you ain't fixed the problem, and people are not stupid, and that's why people are crying out for real change. And as I say, as I said in my article in The Sun, I don't think this sort of like, it's like the 3 tumbler trick where people are hiding the ball and tricking everyone. I don't think that'll wash anymore. I think people do want real change, and that's why we are seeing such support for Nigel Farage, because you might not agree with him, but you know he believes what he says. You know that he doesn't change his views based on the political weather, as so many politicians have done throughout my time in politics. I think the British people believe in him, I believe in him, and I think he's the last hope for Britain for him to come on Prime Minister, and that's what I'm going to be campaigning to do.
And certainly were, I don't know if you still are, pretty close to Boris Johnson. You were in his administration, his government. Did you speak to him about leaving Conservative Party and joining Reform?
You know, I did actually let him know in advance, but not very far in advance. We had a brief text. You know, we have a brief text conversation about it. I think he was probably somewhere glamorous rather than in the UK. I don't know where he was. Look, he's a good personal friend of mine. We have disagreed about many issues. We disagreed about Brexit, for example. That hasn't in any way diminished our friendship, and I hope it won't. You know, I think he's an extraordinary individual, and you know, he's a good friend.
And he said in the past that people should ignore, Tories anyway, should ignore reform. So he's wrong about that, isn't he?
Well, I don't think sticking your head in the sand and ignoring the problems our country's facing is the way forward. Look, people, you know, I've made a choice. I hope people will respect that choice, and I respect other people who disagree with me, because we are allowed to hold different opinions just about still in this country.
Just about.
There might be a knock on the door next week.
Maybe not in the Houses of Parliament, where they heckle Nigel Farage like he doesn't deserve to be there.
Well, you know, he's got as much right as Keir Starmer to be there. But you know, I've made a choice. The choice I've made is to fight for a Britain that I believe in. I'm absolutely certain that it's a shared vision with Nigel Farage and Reform. Of course, just like with friends, there'll be stuff we don't agree on everything. But, you know, my choice is to fight for a better Britain. I think the only way that can be delivered is with a Reform government. I think look, I have been there. I have been in the engine room. I don't blame the Conservatives. The same problem the Labour Party's got. The British state no longer functions in a way that is on the side of our public. It's a self-perpetuating, clapped-out machine. Westminster politics exists for Westminster rather than the rest of the country. That can change. Decline, which we're in now, is not destiny. We have got to find a way to rebuild a Britain we can believe in, to stand tall on the global stage. We're permanently lectured. We should be ashamed of our history. We should be giving, British sovereign territory like the Chagos Islands away because we're slightly embarrassed about how we, hundreds of years ago may have come by. That is not acting in the best interest of Britain. It's not in the best interest of the British people. It's time for change.
Jake Berry, thank you very much indeed. Former Conservative Chairman, now Reform. Good luck with it. We've got much more to do. Chris Parry coming up. We're going to talk to him about the Royal Navy, who are going to be put on some kind of Bibby Stockholm type thing. I mean, it doesn't sound like a war footing to me. Let's just talk.
Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 10. Julie Hartley-Brewer here very shortly. And this is coming from Jamie Jenkins. Labour's alleged small boats plan, 17 in for every 1 out. Here's the math. Swap 50 migrants a week with France, plus 782 arrive by boat, 832 come in, just send 50 back, 17 in, 1 out, as we say. All done by numbers. Absolutely ridiculous. Incredible. One from here, from Howard in Suffolk. He says he's off to the pub for breakfast and a pint. And he says, that video of you at Centre Court was so cool. All those other numpty sheeple in their hats and tennis gear. Life is for living, and you've cracked it, mate. There's some live shots of Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer mingling at Downing Street. There was a great big bromance type hug on the steps of Downing Street when Macron turned up. I'm not quite sure why he's still here. 3 days of a state visit. What can be left to talk about, for heaven's sake? Let's get a quick voice note from Ian.
Michael, Ian from Cumbria here. What jobs? What exactly are these jobs that you keep talking about? Might be all right down in the media circus of London, but for a lot of the country, there is no work. 239,000 jobs lost since the last budget. We've got 30% of all new starter jobs lost since ChatGPT was introduced a year ago. We've got AI accelerating at 300% a year. These jobs are disappearing. The forecasts are that we're going to see a rise from 9 million on universal credit to 22 million on universal credit as all these white-collar jobs are lost. Go and try and find training for a trade, can't get in anywhere. Try and find a job in a pub. Yeah, you can go get minimum wage. There are no jobs in the pubs because the pubs are closing. The fact is whilst the media keeps ranting on about, oh, yeah, we've got to get these people back to work, you guys have got to start listening and thinking, what work? Where are these jobs?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There are no jobs. I keep saying that as well. You know, they keep telling us that they're creating jobs out of thin air. There aren't any jobs. They said they were creating hundreds of thousands of jobs in the defence industry. Well, that's not true, is it? Let's talk to Rear Admiral Chris Parry, former NATO commander. Chris, very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike.
I mean, this huge war footing that we're on, for example, don't see the jobs it's created so far. I don't know if I've missed something. You know, so far all I've seen from the industrial military complex is that we bought a load of planes from America.
Well, we haven't even done that yet, Mike. You know, for a country that's on a war footing, we're looking like a country that's at war with itself at the moment. I don't see any investment in defence at the moment that is making any difference to the economy or indeed to the defence of NATO or our country. It's a post-dated check, frankly, and we've said to Putin and Xi Jinping, can you wait 10 years? We might be ready then, but that's only, of course, if we spend the money. No, I mean, every day you and I wake up to lies from this government, Mike. It's disgraceful.
Yeah, it really is. And the latest sort of ludicrousness is the Royal Navy going to house some sailors on a barge, a bit like the Bibby Stockholm, in a bid to save money, which is not a great look. I mean, I don't particularly object to it. I'm sure the guys in the Navy don't object to it. But it's a pretty sad state of affairs when you've got to put an aircraft carrier into sort of repairs, and meanwhile you've got to use some kind of commercial, you know, sort of mobile motel to put the soldiers and the sailors in.
Well, Mike, look, I've stayed on one of these vessels. It's perfectly habitable. I mean, it's very much like life on board. In fact, it's even better than life on board. You know, the fact of life is, you know, they've been turned down by asylum seekers. They've been turned down by people who think they're acting on behalf of asylum seekers. Again, it's absolutely ridiculous. And it just shows how people's standards have dropped and how casual inefficiency has just been built into every institution we've got at the moment. You know, these are, yeah, I'm looking at accommodation that's better than I stayed in when I stayed on these things. Right. And, you know, the fact of life is we should be giving our soldiers, sailors and Marines proper accommodation ashore. What we've done is got rid of all our, what I call our structural capital, our real estate ashore, and tightened up, and we've been betrayed by generations of senior officers, I'm afraid, who've kowtowed to politicians.
Yeah, and that is the problem, isn't it? Because the politicians can't be trusted. And I mean, and this wouldn't be the first time we've had this conversation. It's not about whether they're Labour or Conservative. It's just about the fact that, you know, politicians, generally speaking, don't tend to keep their word when it comes to what they're going to do.
Well, you know, I mean, I'll use a hackneyed old phrase, so that nowadays defence is too important to be left to politicians alone. The public and the armed forces have actually got to have a voice and have some leverage. You know, I hear every day from Keir Starmer that defence and security is at the heart of everything he does. Well, I've also counted about 15 other things that are at the heart of everything he says and does. Right. So, you know, he's got to come clean with us. This regime, I'm afraid, is conning the public. It's extorting money from us, and we're not seeing any growth in defence or any other area.
No, exactly right. Just to sort of press home, I suppose, the dangers that are abroad out there. There's I don't know, it's a video, I don't know whether you've seen it. A squad of Houthi rebels wielding Kalashnikovs boarded a large carrier ship in the Red Sea, rigged it with explosives, and basically filmed it blowing up and sinking into the sea. Just to show you how dangerous these characters still are, even in the wake of Donald Trump's dealing with Iran.
Mike, I wrote a book in 2014 describing exactly how unmanned vessels by air and sea would be used to do exactly this in the world's choke points. And I'm afraid our politicians of both stripes have totally ignored this threat. and it can happen at any time. I always say that the sea is the physical equivalent of the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
Unless we actually secure it, we're not going to be involved in globalization. Our trade will suffer, and I'm afraid other countries will dictate how we live our lives.
And the Houthis, as you can see there with their guns, I mean, they're obviously not worried about retaliation from America or anywhere else at this point.
No, I'm afraid I'm afraid we have basically exercised self-restraint in relation to what are effectively pirates. Pirates are common enemies of mankind, and I used to suppress them when I was in the Navy. We seem to have got out of the habit of it.
Yeah, it does seem to be the sad case, indeed. Rear Admiral Chris Parry, got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Former NATO commander there with his take on what is going on out there in the big wide world. And it is as dangerous perhaps as it ever was right now, and why we possibly more really do need to be on a war footing. Bill from Thailand says, Mike, Macron will take back 50 illegal boat people a week. So they go back to France, dropped off at the beach and hop on the next boat back. What another great deal. Well, nobody can really explain it yet as to how somebody is going to delineate which one of the 17 gets to stay, why the one gets to stay rather than the other 17, and what happens to them when they go back. I mean, it's just completely and utterly mad. And finally, Jeff says, former Tories going over to reform, is that a good thing? Going to get the same career politicians, nothing will get done. I don't know. I don't think there's enough politicians out there to fill the reform vacancies. That's the point. Julie Hartley-Burroughs here. Very good morning.
Good morning. Yeah,
so,
interesting to hear from Jake Berry today. Yeah.
I mean,
turquoise Tory.
Yeah, turquoise Tory. That's a new phrase. I guess the problem for reformers is that if they are going to win that many seats as they are predicted to win, you can't just keep finding people. You're going to have to adopt a few.
You have to have people from, and there'll be councillors and there'll be others. Whether the former Tory chairman is the answer, I mean, who knows? Again, there are lots of people in the lookout for a job.
Yeah.
Are there not at the moment? But I mean, I'm fascinated by this